The CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by CyberEars. If you're serious about your podcast hosting needs, you should check out CyberEars. Whether you are a podcaster, a radio host, a musician, a narrator, an audiobook author, or simply a school, church, corporation, or anyone else with an audio recording that needs to be hosted or distributed, you should check out cyberears.com. Unlimited bandwidth, fast, reliable, and rugged servers with no hidden fees. CyberEars, your audio, your terms.
Listen, it's getting closer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet? Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
You're listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast, a delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information featuring the Tandy Color Computer. Okay, welcome CoCo Cruisers to episode 17. This is John Linville, and I'm joined once again by, of course, Neil Blanchard. Say hello, Neil.
Hello, everyone.
And once again by Mike Rowan. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
And of course, we are the CoCo Crew. So we're back once again for another delicious adventure into the world of retro computing. So here we are, find ourselves in October. I guess that leaves CoCo Fest just another 6 months away. Can you believe it? Six months since CoCo Fest. 6 months left to go.
It's starting the big sneak.
You guys getting some projects underway?
No, not yet. I got lots of time. I got 6 months.
6 months.
We've got 6 months. It's all good.
That's right.
Yeah, well.
Probably stressing Mark out at Cloud 9, though, by doing the countdown.
Yeah, poor Mark's still working on cleaning up some Super Spectro issues, and I'm sure he's probably got something he wants to cook up brand new too. So it may get a little. Plus, he's got some real life issues that affecting his ability to work on CoCo stuff too. So hopefully that'll all straighten itself out in a good way soon. So Neil, you working on any projects?
I have been busy restoring a pile of Tandy 1000s.
Tandy 1000s? Oh, no.
Yeah. All different types. The old to the new, the later ones, the 46 ones even. And
yeah.
They were just filthy.
Cool, I guess. It's not really CoCo Fest, though. What, are you getting ready for Tandy Assembly a little early?
Yeah, actually, Tandy Assembly's kind of been on my mind, but I got to get back into the CoCo.
Very good. How about you, Mike? You up in any retro projects lately? CoCo or otherwise?
Well, let's see. I recently cleaned up a DMP 135, and it was pretty nasty shape, but I got it cleaned up and reassembled, and it's printing just peachily, so I'm happy with that.
Awesome. What are you using? What are you printing with it?
Not much, really. I usually do some graphics from CoCo Max or Color Max, and then just do some test stuff, print out some word processing documentation from the CoCo. So it all works.
Hey, well, as long as you enjoy it.
Does Color Max have a driver for that printer?
It has. I think it pretty much. A lot of these Tandy 130s will work with the. They're like compatible with the earlier ones. I forget which model you pick. It's the 105 or the.
Oh, okay.
It'll still print properly.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know there is some level of compatibility. I don't know how far it stretches, but Tandy printers tend to act alike, I think, at least within some level of compatibility. So as for me, I haven't been doing a lot of CoCo stuff recently. I have been working on a retro channel. Well, been hosting the retro challenge. I'll mention that a little bit later, and then I've been working on my own project for that, which is wire wrapping a cosmic elf, or I'm somewhat updated, but still basically the same cosmic elf from 1976.
That's a cool project.
So that's been taking a little extra time. Wire wrapping is something I've never really done before, and I can see where it has its uses, but I'm still not quite convinced that it's any faster than I could solder. So I'm probably still not really doing it right, but we'll see. All right. Well, what about eBay? You guys do any acquisitions or maybe sales lately?
I haven't been doing much on eBay, actually, taking a break off it, other than that Tandy power strip I got last month. Pretty much it.
I watch a lot more than I'm purchasing these days, but it is fun to watch some of them. Some good bargains out there still to be had.
Well,
yeah, definitely so. Yeah, well, I always have a few trickling in here and there, or I don't know if you ask my wife and the mailman, they flood in. I picked up, very recently I picked up a Model 1 video display, of course not for a CoCo, but for the Tandy Model 1. That came in and looking pretty good, although it have a little problem with what you'd call the vertical hold or whatever. I'm not actually sure if it's the monitor or the Model 1 itself, but not unhappy with it. So we'll just have to work on that more of an extended project.
Has anyone ever hooked one of those TRS-80 monitors to CoCo? I mean, it's just a composite monitor, right?
Well, so it is, but the cable comes in. It seems to be, connected internally on the monitor side, and then on the computer side, rather than being the traditional RCA plug, it's got a 5-pin DIN plug that it just only uses 2 of the pins. So I'm sure you could build an adapter without a lot of trouble, but I haven't done it.
Because I know you can do that's the other hack you do the Model 1 too, is you can create a cable to hook it just to a normal composite. So just curious.
Yeah, I was tempted to do that and then came across a nice deal, so I went the other direction. I may still have to I may still have to hack the cable.
It's nice to have the original monitor matching too.
Yeah, it looks nice. I did also pick up a collection of MC10 cassettes, the original packages.
Oh, wow.
And it's duplicates of most of what I had, but I was missing the Math Design cassette. And so now I've got original copies of all of the MC10 software that was produced by Tandy.
Excellent.
That's cool.
And I've got duplicates of most things too. So if anybody's hot for that, let me know. Yeah, I should be playing with Mike. I picked up a CoCo graphics designer program from Zebra Systems, which it's one of those programs from like back in the day you'd use for creating signs and banners and that sort of stuff.
I had that program back in the day, and it came in this cool little binder. I don't know if yours came in that.
Yeah, and mine's pretty much loose, but I did get 3 of the graphics discs too, so
cool.
Some extra pictures.
Yeah, that's a neat package.
Yeah. And so then my final big one this month is got a new in the box, still sealed, shrink wrapped Avalon Hill breakthrough game for the CoCo. Looks sort of like I actually haven't run the program, but from the picture on the box, it almost looks like a version of Breakout from like a first-person perspective.
And you said it's sealed?
Yeah, it's sealed in the box, plastic wrap and everything. I think It came from Puerto Rico or It was, it was not the standard continental U.S. for sure. It was, I'm sorry, Venezuela. Yeah, so yeah, that's all
Wow.
the same. It's just Spanish people, they don't care if I get that wrong, right?
We're going to get some feedback now.
Venezuela, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, it's all the same.
Yeah, we
No,
hate
sorry about
everybody
that.
equally.
Yeah. Save it for CoCo list. But that's what I've been doing on eBay lately. So probably plenty enough to shame any normal human, but I'm not ashamed. I enjoy my retro stuff quite a bit.
Well, I have to say, John, you always impress me in the stuff you find on eBay. Like, once in a while you send me a link, and it always amazes me that you find it on there.
Well, all you have to do is just, spend all your free time browsing eBay, and it takes care of itself.
There's a hobby right there.
Yeah, it's a hobby unto itself. Well, anyway, that's probably enough of a warm-up to get us started. So why don't we take a little break, hear from our sponsors or whatever, and we'll be back with our announcements.
Happy Halloween from the CoCo Crew Podcast.
Okay, now we're back with some announcements. We are, of course, the CoCo Crew Podcast. We are available on Twitter as at CoCo Crew Podcast, all one word. We're also available on Facebook. We have a page called The Space CoCo Space Crew Space Podcast, or The CoCo Crew Podcast. Just search for CoCo Crew. I'm sure you'll find us. We are available on iTunes, on Stitcher, and on Google Play, although I have to mention that for some reason Stitcher is stuck and is still, at this point, is still listing our latest episode as 15, when of course 16 has been out. 16 is a little large, so I'm not really sure, that is playing into them not updating their feed or what. I have sent them email. They did not reply. We never have gotten a lot of listeners through Stitcher, so hopefully this is not a lot of people being affected. But just so you know, if you are or you would prefer to be a Stitcher user, we've tried to settle this with them, and so far they've been intransigent. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. Anyway, we are available through iTunes and Google Play. I think we're also available on TuneIn, which is available through that nifty new Amazon Magic Speaker or whatever it's called. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, Alexa.
Yeah. So probably should add that in here somewhere too. But anyway, we are a member of the Throwback Network. That is a collection of retro-themed podcasts, many of which are technology-oriented, around 8-bit computers and early video game consoles and that sort of thing. But there's a few others that are simply retro. Anyway, it's quite a list. If you're looking for other retro-themed podcasts or simply other podcast entertainment, you may want to go and check that out. In addition, we are a member or listed on the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. This is also a list of retro-themed podcasts. These are particularly technology-oriented podcasts dealing with, of course, video games. So if you're looking for retro-themed podcast entertainment, do check out either of those links. Audio for the CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted at Cyber Ears. If you have a need to host audio for whatever reason, your own podcast or whatever you might have, then be sure to check out Cyber Ears, where you get your audio on your terms. If you'd like to reach us by email, Of course, Neil and I, we need to add Mike into this, I guess. But for now, at least, it's still Neil and I are available as either show at cococrew.org, podcast at cococrew.org, or feedback at cococrew.org. And of course, I'm available individually as John, John, at cococrew.org. And if you'd rather talk just to Neil, you can reach him as Neil, Neil, at cococrew.org. That is our standard set of announcements. Now we're going to hit some announcements for some upcoming events. By the time you hear this one, you may have already missed the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, but if not, you may want to check it out. The link's in the show notes. It is of course, a retro gaming themed event held in the Portland, Oregon Convention Center in Portland, Oregon. The event covers all sorts of retro gaming, consoles, arcade, 8-bit computers, all that sort of thing. If you are in the Portland or the Pacific Northwest area of the United States, I recommend you check out the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, October 21st to 23rd. Coming up November 19th and 20th of 2016, there is the Vintage Computer Festival Europe, which will be held in Zurich, Switzerland. This, of course, is a vintage computing festival event open to a variety of old machines. You'll see big iron and 8-bit machines and everything in between. Looks like they've got a nice list of exhibitors and speakers and that sort of stuff. Check out the link in the show notes. Again, that's November 19th to 20th, 2016, Vintage Computer Festival Europe. Coming up December 3rd and through 4th of 2016, we'll have World of Commodore 2016, and that is being held in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. If you are, north of the border, particularly, or if Toronto is a reasonable drive for you, I recommend you go check it out. Sure, it'll be full of Commodore people, but they probably don't bite. You've been to this event?
I have, yeah. It's a great event. Nice people there, and pretty much anything Commodore is going. So.
Cool.
If you're scared of Toronto, it's not quite in Toronto, so it's a little easier to get to. It's in Mississauga technically, but it's Toronto area.
Okay, we'll set the record straight there.
Well, I just know that some people don't like going into the big city. I don't blame them. It's kind of hard to get around.
All right. Well, that closes us out for events this year. We keep on the list of our first event for next year. There'll probably be a few more that'll come in before we get there, but a big event for us for our podcast. Of course, this is the 26th annual last Chicago CoCo Fest. Last, of course, is in quotes because they never know if they're going to have another. Doesn't mean it'll be the last one ever. It just means that it's going to be, when it happens, it'll be the last one so far. Anyway, it's a great event. It'll be held in Lombard, Illinois at the Heron Point Convention Center, April 22nd and 23rd of 2017. Come on out and join us. I'm sure all of us will be there. We'll have talks on retro computing, CoCo in particular, see new products, new faces, new friends, new programs. I'm sure it'll be a great event, and I hope to see all of you there.
Yeah,
be at CoCo Fest, Neil?
Have I been to CoCo Fest?
Are you going to be at CoCo Fest?
Oh, you're definitely going to be at CoCo Fest. Yeah.
Was that Mike trying to get in there?
Yeah, I was going to say it's definitely a good time, and if you haven't been to a CoCo Fest, go to one. You'll have a good time.
Yeah, it may have beneficial effects on thinking or mood, and may make you more likely to reach out to your fellow retro computing hobbyists. It's a great event.
My only complaint is too fast.
Yeah, they do go a little fast. All right. Well, coming up after CoCo Fest is post CoCo Fest, shall we say? In June 9th to 11th, 2017, will be the Southern Fried Game Room Expo held at the Renaissance Atlanta Waverly Hotel and Convention Center. This is a gaming oriented event, of course. They usually have both like arcade and pinball exhibits. I think they have game consoles exhibits as well. They have a Facebook page and a Twitter handle. I'm sure you can find out more information. But I recall that last year they sold out of the hotel pretty early. So if it's the kind of thing that interests you, you may want to keep an eye out on that and make your plans to get to Atlanta a little early. But
I think I'm going to try
anyway.
to make that one next year. I've never been to that one, and I'm kind of intrigued by the pinball side of it too. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, so it looks like a good event. I've had just a little contact with the organizers via Twitter or whatever, but they seem like a friendly group. It seems to be successful. They've run it for 2 or 3 years, or I'm not sure how many years actually. Several years now, at least. I've been watching it for a couple of years, and it seems to be going strong. So
I just love things that are fried as well. So had me at fried.
Yeah, fried is a big benefit for me. All right. Well, so one more event on the list here coming up in, let's see, what have I got it down as? July 18th through 23rd of 2017, of course, will be Kansas Fest 2017. Now, Kansas Fest is an Apple II event, but it is kind of a unique event. It's even a bit older than CoCo Fest, and it certainly has a devout following of Apple II devotees, shall we say, but it's also been drawing other retro computing enthusiasts for the past several years. There's a contingent of Atari 8-bit folks that have been showing up. I went a couple of years ago, didn't go this year. I would like to go again sometime, and it's kind of a neat event. Summer camp for old men. They actually rent out a dorm in the summertime at Rockhurst University in Kansas City, Missouri. They have several days of technical talks and hanging out and people playing with the Apple IIs and other retro computer stuff. It's a great event. So anyway, if that sort of thing sounds appealing to you, you should definitely check into it because that event also has some tendency to sell out. So you may want to be aware of it and mark it on your calendars. And when the registration opens, you may want to hit it as soon as you can. Okay, moving on. We mentioned this last month, but I'm going to mention it again. Our friend of the show, Mike Rowan. Say hello, Mike.
Hello.
Uh-oh. Mike's been producing a lot of audio content for us, and I've made some of this content available through the CoCoCrew.org website. You can get in and download MP3s and for your own entertainment or to include in your own content that you may produce as part of a podcast or whatever else where you might have audio content. I have not updated it recently, although Mike has been sending a few more things in. I should add those out as well. More recently, Mike's actually been producing some video content for us, and I know our YouTube-based friends, David Ladd and Steve Strobridge, have taken some interest there. I know at least David has picked one up. Hopefully Stevie will be picking one up as well. Anyway, so if you want to pick up some of this content for your own, like I said, for your own entertainment or to use in something, I've got the link here in the show notes. You can check it out and download it and, use it wisely.
Yeah, this might be a good time just to send good wishes to Steve Strobridge because he endured Hurricane Matthew, so that's keeping him quite busy digging out from that. Not that he was damaged too badly, but all of Florida is kind of in that mode right now.
Yeah, that's definitely true. We should, keep those people in mind. Even in my own home state of North Carolina, out down east, it's they're still experiencing quite a bit of flooding, which seems a little ridiculous for how long it's been. But it's like the rest of the state is a big sponge that's being squeezed, and all the water's going down there. Not to make light of it. It's a very serious situation for those folks. But yeah, I know Steve definitely he had some pictures showing his preparations that were keeping him busy before the hurricane, and undoubtedly he's got plenty going on. And then we've got the map we talked about last episode. There's a lot of CoCo people between here and there that probably had at least some effect by the big storm. So hopefully everyone kept their head down and didn't go driving in the floods and all that sort of thing that silly people do.
And their CoCo's dry.
And keep your CoCo's dry. That's right. All right. So one more announcement, sort of a vanity thing for me. We'll mention a Retro Challenge many times. This is a twice-a-year event where retro enthusiasts from around the world get together, kind of propose their own projects, and just spend a month doing silly things with their silly or maybe not so silly, but interesting things with their old computers. There've been some changes in the organization of that event, and I ended up being the host of the event now. Current event is for the month of October of 2017. As we record this, we are right in the middle of the Retro Challenge 2016/10, so October 2016. We do have a couple of people that at least have paid some lip service to having an interesting CoCo there, and a couple others who are actually doing some CoCo-specific projects. I think we're going to mention those a little bit later in the news section. But if you're interested in retro computing and its various aspects, you'll probably find at least one project as part of Retro Challenge that will entertain you. So come and check it out. It's available at retrochallenge.net.
Are you still accepting entries?
Well, I have been. I did put on a please no more entries, and then I got one more that I'm going to accept. So if you really want to get into the contest with 2 weeks or less to go, I guess I'll let you in. Like you said, you're going to be judged based on what you've done in the month of October. So, that's up to you if you think you can make a go of it in 2 weeks or less. But like I said, so far I've accepted every entrant. At this point, we might need more prizes to to have a reasonable distribution. I think we were up to about 35, 36 entrants. That's quite a bit.
That's great.
So, yeah, well, it's good to have a lot of activity. So,
yeah, for sure.
Into our weird little hobby that nobody plays with because it's all just for old nerds, right? Well, oh well. All right. Well, anyway, I think that probably concludes our announcements. So let's take another little break, and we'll be back in just a bit with some news.
You're only young once, but you can be retro forever. A single spark of imagination can ignite the flame of the extraordinary.
Introducing Tandy Assembly, the first gathering completely dedicated to Radio Shack and Tandy computer enthusiasts.
Extraordinary.
Recapture the excitement of the early days of Radio Shack microcomputing. Relive the Tandy evolution of MS-DOS compatible systems. Meet people who continue to support and expand these retro computer systems. New products, new software, new ideas.
A single spark of imagination.
From Pocket Computer to Tandy 6000. From Z80 to 486.
You're only young once.
We're not finished rediscovering our most beloved computers. Join us at Tandy Assembly.
Retro forever.
Something new is coming. October 2017. Tandy Assembly.
Okay, Coconuts. now we're back with some news. It's the news segment. I don't know. I'd say it's still pretty healthy this month, but it may be a little shorter than usual. It's really only been about 3 weeks between recording sessions, so the news hasn't quite built up as much as it usually does. I think there's probably still enough here that we can make the best of it. You guys think we can do all right with this?
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, so the first, really our first three are all from Rick Adams. Of course, Rick Adams was a game developer from back in the day on the CoCo. And I think you may have mentioned earlier in some earlier news or maybe in interviews he's done, like with Steve Strobridge or whatever, that he had worked on a game called Bomb Threat. That Bomb Threat had kind of disappeared. And then at some point he found some video footage of it, and he is now making some of that available. And so he's got a gameplay video for Bomb Threat that he posted to Facebook. And unfortunately, all he's got is the VHS recording of the play. It looks like a kind of a cool game to play, and maybe eventually Rick will find find that source code in his basement or whatever. I think he made a joke somewhere about putting WikiLeaks tapes in his, giving a tip to the FBI that he's got WikiLeaks tapes in his video or in his basement to help him search. Along the same lines, Rick also posted, the next link is him posting gameplay of Shanghai during development. It says, note that his default tile color set at the time was different than the final colors chosen, and that she's included that color set as a hidden option in the final version. I think Neil's mentioned that.
Yeah, you can access that actually. It's a hidden spot on the screen if you click with the mouse. It'll enable that set. It's really cool.
It's cool.
Yeah. And cool. And so then one more video Rick has posted, some gameplay of Temple of Ram during development. And then he says originally his player was a simple square as an homage to the Atari adventure game that inspired it, which I didn't realize. I didn't realize Temple of Ram was inspired by adventure. Did you guys know that?
No, I didn't actually. I was surprised to read that.
I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense. They're sort of similar in some sense in the gameplay, but anyway, kind of cool. Thanks, Rick, for sharing those videos. It's cool to get some insight into the development history of those games, and hopefully we get to see Bomb Threat someday. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that would.
Yeah, I also enjoyed Rick's video of getting the CoCo Crew podcast set up on his Amazon device. That was kind of neat to see him just ask for it to start playing, and it comes right on. That's neat.
Yeah, no, that is pretty cool. We live in a golden age of technology in some ways. Hopefully, the technology isn't just feeding it to some poor person in Mumbai, just listening to hear Rick speak a command and then press a button. Which I would not be surprised these days if that's the way things are done. But I guess I'm just throwing shade. The next four are all from Ed Snyder, and they're referencing his firmware development for his MC10 Supercart. And so we've kind of mentioned before that Ed's been doing some work with the MC10 cartridges. He has the ROM game cartridge that he made available. He's been working on the Supercart that has, ROM and RAM available, and I guess it has it's going to have a sound chip available, and I guess he's trying to expand out the firmware to make it friendly and easy to use or whatever. So he had 3 or 4 posts over the course of the month, and as he added and improved his menu. All the way up to now, he's finally got a music player built into the menu, so you can pick music that plays on the AY3 8910 style of audio chip, and it sounds really good, of course. It's a pretty neat project. It's the card itself is probably more advanced than the MC10.
Yeah, without a doubt.
I was actually thinking that.
It's kind of neat. It's interesting when somebody posts all their development along the course of a month or whatever, or the course of how they're doing it. You can kind of see stuff progress. So that's kind of cool. Either you guys going to jump in on that MC10 supercar when it's available?
Yeah, I'm thinking of jumping in because I've actually figured out how to get a power source working for my MC10.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, believe it or not, a 9-volt power adapter, AC, will work. And NES power adapter. It actually works.
That's good to know, because there's so many of those out there without power supplies on eBay.
I know. I noticed that, and I have 2 here without power supplies, and I figured, well, I gotta try something. So I was actually did some research and got that working.
Good.
You plug it into a NES power brick. Yep. Well, those are fairly common, plus replacements for those are common, so that's cool.
Yeah, there's aftermarket ones that they're still making, so that's great.
And does the NES brick output AC or DC power?
AC.
It is AC.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, we'll move on. And like I say, I'll try to get that link in the show notes fixed. All right. So moving on. The next one is a link to a thread on the CoCo mailing list. The thread was started by Barry Nelson. I kind of took interest in it. Actually, I think he kind of hijacked another thread, which is a sort of an email, internet etiquette kind of thing. But I'll try not to be pissy about that. But anyway, he's talking about Cave Walker, which is a game for the CoCo. It says Cave Walker does not run on Nitrous 9 L2 on physical hardware, but does run on Nitrous 9 L2 on VCC. It runs on OS 9 L2 on physical hardware fine, and when run that way, it takes advantage of some CoCo 3 features. So anyway, that led to a fair amount of discussion, about, there's OS 9 level 1 V2 versus OS 9 level 2 and, whatever. But for me, the big thing was, why does it run on VCC if it doesn't run on physical hardware? So it kind of suggests that, VCC isn't doing something quite right, even if it kind of creates a result that's more pleasurable, right?
Right.
So I don't know. I guess that's a kind of an ongoing thing that people dealing with emulators. I think there's plenty of people in the community that are happy with an emulator that runs stuff that it's not supposed to. Whereas for me, if it runs stuff that it's not supposed to, that's just as bad as not running stuff that it is supposed to. You know what I mean? So
that's right. Like an emulator should be true to the real hardware, at least in my opinion.
Well, I mean, I can kind of see it both ways depending on your exact situation. But
especially for people that are developing in these emulators, because they may think it's running great, and then they, get it on real hardware, it doesn't run.
Right, and as a developer in general, that's kind of where my perspective is. But like I said, I knew a lot of people that were happy to play Farfall on VCC, even though VCC is supposed to be a CoCo 3 emulator, and Farfall doesn't run on the CoCo 3. But if you want to play Farfall, that's great, and if you're using VCC, right? But,
right.
Yeah.
But you don't have to find another emulator. So I guess it just all depends on your perspective. But if you're using VCC and decided to use SG12 graphics mode and it works fine, and then you can't figure out why it doesn't run on real hardware, that would be disappointing.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
If you're developing medical applications, you probably shouldn't be using VCC.
That's probably true. Yeah, any life or death development for the CoCo, you may not want to use VCC, but I don't know. Hopefully they'll fix it up at some point. But I guess that remains to be seen. But anyway, just wanted to include this thread because I thought that was interesting to note that there are these sort of issues out there. Okay, the next one is just a link out to, and I'm not even sure how I stumbled across this. And the person, Chris Smith, is somebody that I think I see some, random hacker, technical, retro hacker kind of stuff from at different times. anyway, there's a link out to his page, this Chris Smith page on Thingiverse. And if you're not familiar with Thingiverse is kind of, well, it's almost like a SourceForge or GitHub kind of page, but instead of having source code for a program, what it has is design files for 3D printers, but it's basically for any kind of 3D manufacturing. It's just that sort of most people that use it are using it for 3D printing. And so he's got a couple of projects out here that he's listed. Right now I see 4, and a couple of them are TRS-80 Model 100 related, battery covers and such, and then a couple of them are CoCo related, one of which is a case for the Raspberry Pi, which is a popular kind of hackerish Internet of Things kind of development board that runs Linux on an ARM processor. But a lot of people use them for running like retro emulation kind of projects or whatever. Anyway, so he's got a case for the Raspberry Pi that's in the shape of a Color Computer 1. And so that's kind of cool. If you're into that sort of thing, especially if you're going to use a Raspberry Pi to do a CoCo emulation, you may want to do something like that. So you may want to look at that. The other thing he has is a pretty slick-looking case for the CoCo SDC cartridge. Now I know a lot of people have gotten the cases from John Strong for the CoCo SDC.
I'm still running the original CoCo SDC case from Tim Lindner.
Okay, there's that as well.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of cases I'm sure that can, or at least those variants that exist that can be used. Of course, the original case was designed for was a spare FD 502 style of case or something like that.
That's right.
But if you don't want to use one of those, or if you're just still looking around, not quite happy with the case that you've been using, or you just want to be different, then you may want to check out Chris's Thingiverse site and check out his design.
It's very cool. Very cool.
Really makes you want to get a 3D printer.
Yeah, I kind of got into the 3D printing a little too early. Kind of let my wallet get ahead of my actual knowledge, and so I bought one of the early MakerBot cupcakes, which was like the first ones that was sort of available to the general public, and I never quite really got it to work because it was just really fiddly. You had to set a lot of things just right, and you had to understand a lot of stuff about the software that you may not need to know as much about now to make things work. And anyway, I never quite got it to work right, and it seemed like every time I'd get it close to working right, that something would break and I'd have to repair it. So it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth for 3D printing. And having seen enough 3D printing as it did become successful, I'm not actually all that happy with the physical outputs of most 3D printers. It's not as nice as, say, the injection molded stuff or whatever, in my opinion. But
it doesn't look the same at all.
Yeah, but it is cool, and so you can do some really cool things with 3D printing. At some point, I'll probably buy another newer, more of a 3D printing appliance kind of design, and then maybe I can, be less onerous or whatever about 3D printing. Anyway, speaking of cool, though, we've been talking about cool stuff. So Matt Witt posted a picture to the TRS-80 MC10 group on Facebook, and which is really cool. I think his title is "When You're Bored and Realize You Have the Stuff to Reproduce a Magazine Cover from the 80s." Or from June 1983, it says. And so he's got a picture, and I assume it's probably from Rainbow, but it's a MC10 with the book for the MC10, and then a cassette player, and then a portable television, and it's running a program that shows an American flag on the television. It's got a kid smiling or whatever, and it's even got a little pot with some colored pins or something in it. And then he did his own picture, and he's got the MC10. He had the exact same portable television, the exact same cassette recorder, and then he even threw in, and it's not exactly the same, but he threw in a little coffee cup with colored pens and stuff.
Yeah, that was awesome. Really great.
What blew me away was that little color television.
Yeah,
that just sets it off. And Matt doesn't strike me as a guy who has time to be bored, but when he is, we hope he's bored some more because that was so cool.
Yeah, very funny, very funny, very, clever humor for sure. And why on earth he has that television, I don't know. Maybe he's a more obsessive collector than any of us are, or maybe he just happened to have it. But that's pretty cool. We should have a contest for something like that for CoCo Fest or whatever.
I was thinking the same thing. It'd be a good contest idea to recreate either an advertisement or a cover.
Yeah, so maybe we should just have an open contest to send us your recreations of your Tandy Computer Magazine ads or whatever, and anything that strikes us as cool, maybe we'll send you one of those Steve Strobridge DVDs or something like that.
A free subscription to CoCo Crew Podcast.
Well, there you go. Well, nobody plays our contest. I guess everybody thinks we're too tough or something, but we need some kind of participation. So come on.
That's right.
Somebody send us in some cool stuff. See if you can beat Matt's picture. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and if you send it to the show, we can post it in the notes. So even though it's a podcast, you can still get to the pictures. That'd be cool.
Well, that'd be cool. All right. Well, moving on. The next one is from Norm Lemeroux. Looks French, but I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it. Norm, let me know how I should be pronouncing it if I'm not getting close enough.
I think you got it. It sounded good.
He posted to the Color Computer Facebook group, and it's a T-shirt with graphics on it. It's CoCo Cat. Happy 5th anniversary and the Rainbow 2 CoCo Cat fan club member. I guess the CoCo Cat and the Rainbow 2 fan club member. And so was this an iron-on? Somebody, Bill Pierce, has a comment beneath it, says that he still has the iron-on and the Rainbow issue it came in. So is this an iron-on that came in Rainbow that you could put on your own T-shirt?
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah?
Yeah,
That's pretty cool. I should look and see if I've got that.
We should do a run of those T-shirts.
Yeah, we should remake that graphic, and this wouldn't be too hard.
Yeah,
if only we knew somebody who was clever with digital editing and could reproduce graphics and sound and that sort of stuff. Oh, we could change it so instead of happy 5th anniversary, you could say, hey, have you got your CoCo 3 yet?
Yeah, there you go.
Sounds good.
Well, anyway, that's cool. I think we all have some fond memories of CoCo Cat roaming around the pages of Rainbow Magazine. So I'd probably like to have one of those T-shirts. I don't know if I would, if I actually found the iron-on in my magazine, I don't know if I could bring myself to use it. Just since it's an, the antique or whatever. But maybe I would.
There was some cool stuff in the Rainbow magazines. You got the iron-on, and then there was that floppy record.
Yeah.
That was neat.
And there were some with posters, I believe, too.
Yeah, I was going to say, were there posters? I wish there were more CoCo posters out there.
I know.
Somewhere I picked up one that came with the Clendathu game. You remember Clendathu?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently it came with a poster, and I got a copy of that, just a poster from someone. It's been a while. I think maybe that Atom game had one as well. So maybe a couple of the games had them. And of course, there's that the wizard or whatever from the Rainbow Adventure issues or whatever. I know Boise ended up with. I think it had belonged to Tony at some point, and he gave it to Boise or sold it. I'm not sure which, but then Boise had it mounted in a nice frame or whatever, and has it hanging in his office down there in Cloud 9 Lab South, and makes me jealous.
Looks nice. Yeah.
Anyway, so now we have another chapter 33 of the Popstar Pilot game development blog by Nick Morentis. And basically, this is not really about development so much as some of the details of getting it shipped and whatever. And then he has links to some videos. Actually, we're going to mention these videos a little bit later. And anyways, so he's just sort of wrapping up, I think, the project here in this blog post. I don't know if there'll be any more after that. Not many, I imagine. But yeah, it's getting close to the end of October, so hopefully those Popstar Pilot game media will be heading out across the world soon, making its way to my mailbox and yours. What do you think?
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely.
Can't wait to try that game.
Yeah, it looks pretty cool. Should be fun to play.
It's the perfect time of year to get something like that when the holidays coming up.
That's right.
Yep. Should be fun.
Yeah, and I've always been a big fan of 2D shooters, so it's kind of one of my favorite genres.
Side-scrolling?
Yeah, side-scrolling 2D.
All right, so here's another one from Matt Witt. And this was basically just, I guess he had gotten a copy of Ed Snyder's MC10 game cartridge. So he said, how cool is the first ever MC10 game cartridge? Off the freaking chart cool. Thanks, Ed, Bosco, and Darren. Now back to working on my Flag and Bird high score. And I'm not sure if that's what drew Bosco, that's Steve Bamford's attention, but apparently Steve had not been aware of this project. And so this project's a little bit strange in a sense that Steve actually wrote his Flag and Bird game for the CoCo, or for the Dragon, I guess. So it's a 6809 machine language game. Well, Darren Atkinson, who is a very, very talented individual, has taken the time to do basically machine language translations of a couple of games. One of them was Space Assault, I guess, and the other, of course, is Flag and Bird, and translate the 6809 code to the 6803 machine language necessarily to run on the MC10. And then Darren made those binaries available to Ed, who included them on his game cartridge. But I think somewhere in this confusion, maybe, I don't know. I don't really know what happened. But one way or another, it sounds like Steve was unaware of the game cartridge going out. And he found out about it. And it looks like he wasn't entirely happy about finding out this way. And who can blame him? I mean, it's on the one hand, it's cool that somebody's using your stuff or doing these things with your code. On the other hand, it might be nice to know that in advance, right? So anyway, I think we're going to talk about this a little more extended fashion a little bit later. But this link is to the conversation or to the interaction on Facebook that kind of leads to our host topic discussion a little bit later. So just for reference, if nothing else. What do you think, guys?
It's a good topic to discuss.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think most people wouldn't mind as long as they had the heads up on it at least.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think Steve did not seem to be particularly upset. But
just kind of a strange way to find out.
Yeah, well, and I don't know that Ed really. I mean, I don't know if he made a serious mistake. He might have been a little confused, or by because I think he didn't even know that Steve Bamford was Bosco.
That's right.
And so I'm not sure if he knew who Bosco was. Maybe he thought it was an alias for Darren. I don't know. Maybe we should probably not go too far on that discussion without bringing in Ed or somebody to talk about it. I don't know that we're going to litigate this particular situation, but this is just a seed for a discussion that we're going to have a little bit later. And And hopefully we won't, get too specific on any of that. We'll just talk around the issue and expand it out into some other kind of related topic. Anyway, we'll get there another 20 minutes or so.
Sounds good.
All right. So let's move on. Now, this one is not CoCo related. So it's Atari ST computer sales and market share, a comparison. And a comparison to what? Well, it's on a forum called AmigaLove.com. And in case you weren't paying attention to computers in the 90s, the Amiga and the Atari ST were kind of rivals.
Oh, yeah.
So the Atari ST computer sales and market share, a comparison to the Amiga, is basically what the title ought to mean. And so it's kind of an interesting read. There's some numbers in there. None of them are about the CoCo, although there are numbers in there for the Apple II. You could draw some distinctions from there, or some conclusions from there. I don't know how valuable they'd be, but the point being, I think this kind of numerical analysis is something that a lot of people are interested in the retro scene, and knowing exactly who sold what to who, how much, that sort of stuff is definitely something that I would like to know. In this case, not so much about the Amiga and the Atari, but is about the 8-bit Ataris versus the Commodores and the TRS-80s and the Apple and that sort of stuff. And for whatever reason, these numbers are pretty hard to come by. So I guess I've included this partly just so you can see how much trouble they went through to get these numbers, which just are a little bit closer in time to us now. And maybe, they were bigger companies. So you'd think they'd be a little bit easier to get, but alas, I don't think they were. But anyway, so I included it. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. And hopefully it throws some understanding on why these numbers are hard to get for machines that are a little bit closer to us.
Just like can't get the number of how many CoCo 3s were sold.
Or how many CoCos in general.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going for. But oh well.
It'll be a mystery.
Yeah. All right. Again, the next one's also not particularly CoCo related, although it comes a little bit closer to being TRS-80 related at least. History of Xenix, Microsoft's forgotten Unix-based operating system. Hopefully most of us have heard of Unix. If you're a little bit too young to have heard of Unix, maybe you've heard of Linux. Anyway, if you're not familiar with Unix or the Unix wars or the whatever, that's certainly a retro topic that's worthwhile to pursue on your own through Wikipedia or whatnot. But it is interesting to hear that Microsoft at one point was a big, really a Unix vendor through by way of Xenix. The part of that sales was through the Tandy's 6000 line. I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting. It's not a real long story, so
it is interesting. At one time, Radio Shack was like the largest supporter and user of Xenix because of the 6000. Yeah. And
it's amazing.
Pete Satinsky's got some really cool videos out on his YouTube channel. I watched one recently of doing a backup to an external hard drive. And it's kind of neat because you can watch, he's using tar basically through a menu system to back everything up. But you can see all those familiar Xenix commands as they're getting copied over. So kind of fun.
Yeah. Moving on back to something a little more CoCo related. Of course, in many of our shows, we've mentioned Jim Geary. Is a prolific author for CoCo stuff, or particularly for the MC10, and that's what most of these links here are going to be. But so he's got he posted about his port of Miniature Golf by Mitch Voth, which I don't know if that's a well-known game or not, but he's got a description on his blog about where the game comes from and what he's done to port it. He kind of continues on with some other games that he's picked up, Deep Scan, Graph Demo, and Fur Trade. And he's making these available on his homepage, along with all the other games that he's done, including a simulation game by David All. I should look that one up because David All posted, David All did a number of kind of type-in basic books back in the day. And I don't know if any of them actually targeted the MC-10. Some of them might have had translation instructions for the CoCo. I'm not sure, but so there's probably a little bit of work involved in taking those games and making them work on the MC-10. But yeah, so David All particularly had a book of basic programs for doing simulations that I actually recently acquired off of eBay because, of course, I did. And, so I should look and see if I can figure out which one he's simulating here. Pretty cool stuff.
Jim Gary, it's amazing how much he's porting over. If you need help in the basic computer language, I think it'd be safe to ask Jim.
Yeah, no kidding. He's definitely got some expertise there.
Yeah.
And a lot of interest or free time or what, I don't know. He's enjoying himself. I know at one time he did some of this work with his, I think his son, certainly his kid. I think it was his son. And definitely I can see how if your kid wants to do that sort of thing, it'd be fun to do together. But either way, I hope he's having fun. Certainly he's still doing it, so presumably he's still enjoying himself. So thank you, Jim, for sharing that with us, because it's good to have that information and let people know you're not the only weirdo playing with the old computers.
Yeah, keep them coming, definitely. It's great.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of making sure we know we're not the only weirdos, the next two links come from Steve Strobridge. Steve, of course, is our big YouTube personality in the community, sort of maybe the lead one. We've got at least David Ladd is coming up on his 6 at this point. But Steve posted a couple of links where the first one is about this link's talking about CoCo Fest 25 bonus video part 1. He actually did part 2 as well. And these are videos he did basically from the sing-along or the play-along or whatever they do. It's a Saturday night kind of jam session. And I think they didn't really do a lot of singing in this time. It was mostly playing music, but I could be wrong. It's not my favorite part of the CoCo Fest, but some people do enjoy it, and it's kind of a cool, quirky thing. So some people enjoy it. I'm glad we got it documented on tape, so we can preserve it. Anyway, so he did that, and then also he has a couple of videos he did with Nick Morentis. One was a pretty extensive tape or video relating to Gatecrasher, which was a game that Nick did some time ago. And basically, Gatecrasher is based on a technology demo done by John Kowalski or Sockmaster for using raycasting, which is the technology behind Wolfenstein 3D and Doom. And so Gatecrasher was a Doom style, or it's probably closer to Wolfenstein style of game, where it's a first-person shooter. You go into different rooms and shoot bad guys and have an adventure that way. And so this is an extended gameplay with Nick talking to Stevie and giving him advice on how the game is played and giving some amount of insight on how the game was developed and that sort of thing. So it's reasonably interesting video to watch. I watched it. As well as that, Nick and Steve did a video, just basically an unboxing of a preliminary copy of Popstar Pilot. And so show how the game itself is being packaged physically, and then show the gameplay and author interview, that stuff. Did you guys watch these videos?
Yeah, I checked them out.
Yeah, I definitely watched the Popstar. I hadn't had a chance yet to. There's so many videos. Steve's like a machine putting these things out, so it's hard to get all the time to watch them, but they are very enjoyable.
They are.
Yeah. Well, it's a good problem to have, complaining about too much content. But
That's true.
yeah. Oh Lord. Well, cool. Well, Steve, thanks for making those videos and making us aware of them. It's good to see like I say, more content in the community helps. You never know which bit is going to inspire somebody else to do their own project or add their own content to the community. And the more that we get, the more we grow and the more opportunity we have to enjoy our hobby. So very cool stuff. All right, the next one is, well, speaking of David Ladd, he had done a video, and it's setting up DriveWire 4 server on a Raspberry Pi running Raspbian Wheezy. So if you're familiar with the Linux world, shall we say, there's one of the most well-known community distributions of Linux is one of the oldest, called the Debian, which literally got its name from its two kind of co-founders, a couple named Deb and Ian. So Debian. And anyway, this venerable distribution is used by a number of people for a number of reasons, but for a number of tasks or purposes. But the Raspberry Pi kind of Internet of Things style computer that's out there, for whatever reason, they base their kind of standard distribution on Debian, but they're not actually officially part of the Debian project. So they've kind of got a version that they call Raspbian. And so it's a little play on words, right? And so Wheezy is the name given to the version of Raspbian. So I think that's a fairly recent version. David is showing how to install. I don't know if he actually shows installing Raspbian Wheezy on the Raspberry Pi or not, but he shows how to install DriveWire 4 on top of that operating system and make use of it. So it's kind of a tutorial video, and it's just a good way to pass on some knowledge within the community.
Yeah, that was a good video. I did watch that video, and one of the things I did like about it is he does not show installing Raspbian, because, as he says in the video, there's dozens of those out there. So if you've got a Raspberry Pi with it already installed, he just walks you through installing DriveWire and setting it up.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm sure other people have done that, but it's kind of cool because you could easily put a Raspberry Pi inside the case of your CoCo and just always have a DriveWire 4. Wouldn't be hard to wire it to power either.
Yeah.
Or this could warrant that 3D printed case for the CoCo 1.
Exactly. We got to get one made for the CoCo.
So, all right, very cool. Now, the next one, this is a pretty simple query that somebody posted to the TRS-80 Color Computer Facebook group a couple of days ago. Can a CoCo 2 keyboard be retrofitted to work in a CoCo 1? And I think it's kind of an interesting question because the answer is sort of it depends. And so it turns out there are a number of variations of the CoCo 1, different motherboards, and some of the motherboards had different connectors for the keyboard. Some of the motherboard connectors were the same or similar as what were used on the CoCo 2, and some were not. And then I've seen, as far as CoCo 2 keyboards, I definitely have seen CoCo 2 keyboards that had the CoCo 2 keyboards use a Mylar film cable that kind of just gets shoved into the end of a connector on the motherboard. And so to facilitate that shoving, they have a piece of plastic kind of glued onto them to firm them up at the end. But I've seen some that have the piece of plastic glued on one side versus some that have it glued on the other. And so not every CoCo 2 keyboard works on every CoCo 2. So then if you do, once you answer the question of can you put a CoCo 2 keyboard on the CoCo 1, then you're back to but which CoCo 2 keyboards will work on your CoCo 1? You know what I mean? So it's kind of a complicated issue. So anyway, there's some discussion on the Facebook chat. There actually, not just a month ago or so, I found a link to a CoCo mailing list that was basically the same question. And so I've included a link to that down in the show notes using a CoCo 2 keyboard and a CoCo 1. And it's actually Jason Lee Steers involved in both discussions. So you probably get similar information between the two, but you never know what little factoid might escape. Right? So anyway, it's an interesting topic. Maybe we'll go into it at some point on the show, but it's a little bit, well, I don't know if it's specific or not, but I don't know. We'll take it under advisement on that. But hopefully, between all this sources of information, Daniel Wolfson, who's the person who asked the question, maybe he can get a good answer.
I guess a lot of people want to change their CoCo 1 keyboards because they don't like those chiclet keys.
Yeah, I guess so. Or they probably wear out too, though.
True.
That could be they can't find a CoCo 1 because I know I'm a fan of the CoCo 1 chiclet keyboard. I think
Yeah, I
people
like it too.
dismiss it too early. If you've used it for a while, it's actually quite good, I think.
I know as a kid I had a CoCo 1 and I was pretty good. I could actually touch type on the chiclet keyboard. Of course, my hands were smaller then, but and they move better. But
And if you think about it, we've actually gone back to chiclet keyboards. I mean, most laptops now, even desktop keyboards.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if that's too good, but
yeah.
Anyway, well, moving on. So there was a query to the CoCo mailing list, which in the past Jim Brain had been working on a replacement for the multi-pack interface, and his base replacement was 4 ports, but then I guess he also had a configuration where you could go up to 8 ports. The use the way the slot settings are encoded on for use of the different selecting different ports on the multi-pack, I think lends itself to being extended certainly beyond 4 ports, and so there are some designs floating around for 8-port MPIs, maybe even bigger. But I guess some people want an 8-port MPI, particularly I guess it was Camelus BlockX was asking about it. So I think he sent a couple of these out asking for these updates, and so finally Jim responds that he's not working on it right now. His system can support 8 ports, but he's concentrating on using it for 4 ports because he doesn't think 8 ports is of much practical use. So if you're hoping to see an 8-port MPI come out, you may want to refocus your hopes, or you need to contact Jim and tell him why you really need it.
8 ports. Imagine how huge that would be.
Yeah, I don't really see much reason to have 8 ports unless you got some pretty specialized combination of hardware on the CoCo, but I don't know.
Talk about some desk real estate.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, like I said, if you have some custom hardware, maybe there'd be a reason to have up to 8 of the same kind of design, or 8 whatever. But
right,
if you're building custom hardware, you could probably put them all on one card, get it done with one slot anyway. But
true.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the size of it, or an interface to some other kind of bus.
Yeah. All right. Well, so our last 3 news items are really, I mentioned we have over 30, over 35, I think, retro challenge entries. But not that many of them are really CoCo specific. There's a couple of beyond these that mention the CoCo, I think maybe trying to curry favor with the judge. But there were 2 or 3 that kind of seemed a little more focused on the CoCo. So I'm going to go ahead and give them a little publicity here because, judge, it's my prerogative, I guess. And so one of them is Simon Jonason. And Simon, is pretty familiar to people that have been in the community. He does a lot of kind of demo style or demo scene style of coding for the CoCo, which is kind of amazing. Nobody else has really ever done that for the CoCo. He entered the contest this time with a music tracker application he wants to do for the CoCo. And this is essentially the Amiga style tracker sound player for the CoCo. I think he's targeting he says CoCo 1, 2, or 3. It looks like a cool project. His last blog entry was October 3rd. So hopefully we can maybe we can rattle his cage by mentioning him on the podcast and get him back on track. We'll see, but it's a cool project, and I hope that we get some software out of it and people can play mod tracker type of music on the CoCo. That'd be pretty cool. See, the next person is a Jeremy Harton. Jeremy, I don't think he's done a great deal. It looks like he was just sort of trying to find something to do with his CoCo. Mentioned using his tape deck and learning DriveWire 4. One of his blog entries says he managed to load a tape version of Scriptset and save and load a file with Audacity. Jeremy, I hope you're having fun, and hope you're learning something about your CoCo, and maybe we can get something cool out of the experience at least. All right, the last one was this is the late last minute entry that I mentioned earlier. All right, so this is Derek John Evans, and we mentioned him, I think, in the last episode for his Win CMOC project, where he had pushed some stuff up to GitHub, where he'd done some work on enhancing CMOC. That's the C-Lite compiler from Pierre Sarrazin. Anyway, he's got a project now that he's running. It says his goal is to get his 26-year-old Color Computer 2 connected to his Windows system so he can browse, load, save files. Now, of course, that sounds a bit like DriveWire, but I guess he's looking for something that maybe is a little simpler than DriveWire to use as part of his development process, I guess. I don't know. We'll see where he goes with it. Like I said, he's kind of a late entry, so he's only got a couple of weeks to work on the project. But I don't know. Hopefully it'll be cool. We'll be looking for some cool results from that.
Yeah, it's sometimes interesting to see how people will approach the same problem differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody has their own ways.
All right, well, that's the end of the news. So we're going to take another little break, and we'll be back to discuss some listener feedback.
The Adventures of CoCo Cat! Brought to you by the makers of Gimme Crisp, the tasty oat cereal featuring crispy magenta and buff O's, now with 3 vitamins and herbs. And now, Chapter 9, The Contract. Last episode, Mr. Perkins and CoCo Cat were making their way to sign the new conference center contract for CoCo Fest.
Gee, CoCo Cat, I can't wait until the next CoCo Fest. This one ought to be a doozy. The only thing we have left to do is make it all official by signing the papers. Good afternoon, Miss Parker.
Hello, Mr. Perkins. Hello, CoCo Cat. I'll let Mr. Norton know you're here.
Yes, Madge?
Mr. Norton, Mr. Perkins is here for his 2 o'clock appointment.
Send them right in.
Pleased to meet you, Mr. Norton. We usually work with Mr. Yonkers. Is there some reason he's not available?
He took sick at the last minute. Listen, we have to discuss the contract price.
Gosh, Mr. Norton, we're really excited about CoCo Fest.
Yes, well, I've prepared the papers, but we have to discuss the cost.
The cost, but I already agreed on the price with Mr. Yonkers last week. I have his official quote and everything.
Pipe down, you two. Listen, I know for a fact that more and more people are attending CoCo Fest. That means more dough in your pocket, and that means I want some more in mine. I have sales quotas, you know.
Calm down, CoCo Cat. Listen, can we speak to Mr. Yonkers? I'm sure he'll clear up this whole misunderstanding.
No, I don't think so. You either agree to the increase or we're going to have trouble, Mr. Perkins.
You shouldn't have said that.
Get him off! Get him off! Get him off! Get him off me!
That's him, officer.
Oh, my goodness!
Mr. Yonkers!
Mr. Yonkers, what happened?
This scoundrel tied me up so he could put the squeeze on Mr. Perkins.
Come on, you. We're going downtown.
I'm glad you're all right, Mr. Yonkers. I guess with all the excitement, I'll probably have to come back to sign the contract.
Horse feathers. I have the real contract right here. You sign here, and the conference center is yours for CoCo Fest.
There you go, Mr. Yonkers. Thanks a lot.
It's my pleasure, Mr. Perkins. Miss Parker, I'm going to have to go down to the police station now. Would you kindly show our guests out?
Oh, yes, sir.
And given all the excitement, you may as well take the rest of the afternoon off.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Yonkers.
Well, CoCo Cat, it looks like our work is done here. Say, Miss Parker, can we drop you off anywhere?
Actually, I could use a lift home. But before we do, how about a cup of coffee? There's a little place around the corner.
Why, that sounds swell, Miss Parker. How about you, Coco Cat? This concludes another fine adventure brought to you by the makers of Gimme Crisp, the tasty oat cereal featuring crispy magenta and buff O's. And now, to all of our CoCo Cat Club members, get out your secret hexadecimal to ASCII decoders. This week's message: 4 7 4 9 4 D 4 5 4 3 7 2 6 9 7 3 7 0. Be sure to tune in next week for The Adventures of CoCo Cat.
All right, welcome back, CoCo Cruisers. Part of the reason we do this podcast, of course, our main reason is to promote CoCo Fest and keep people excited and interested in the hobby. But part of that, of course, is building community and hearing from people and keeping in contact with our listeners. And so we love to get feedback however it comes, whether it's through email or Facebook or, a few of you out there even can call us on the phone, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure we want to promote that, but, it has happened from time to time. Anyway, so first up in our feedback, this section, we actually have a pretty good feedback section this month. First up is Ed Snyder. Ed Snyder's feedback from last month is, I guess the two MC10 cards could possibly get confused. One is just a basic software / RAM card with 32K of RAM and 16K of ROM. He goes on a bit, and then these boards are not based on the MCX 128, by the way, though I can see why it might be thought so since I produced a couple of runs of those. That's I think I said that I was thinking they were similar, mea culpa in that case. Interestingly enough, however, there may be a version of MCX Basic included on the Supercart firmware. So a little bit of a pre-announcement there, but the Supercart may include MCX Basic as an option. MCX Basic, of course, is an extension of Microcolor Basic. It kind of makes it a bit more like Extended Basic, I think, is the gist of it. There might be even more to it than that, but basically it's a better Basic for the MC10. Anyway, so there might be even more reason to buy the Supercart firmware when it becomes available. All right, the next up comes from, is it Kieran Anscombe? I think that's Kieran. Kieran. Actually, I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to say Kieran. Kieran, if I'm mispronouncing your name, you know what to do. He says, I think I might have mentioned this on IRC, but as you're interested, it might be worth noting that XROAR, Kieran, of course, is the author of XROAR, by the way, that XROAR does this semi-properly now. This is in reference to NTSC artifacting. So as of version 0.34, by having a variable color burst signal that's multiplied with a low-pass filtering of the signal to generate the color. So he just says, just pick simulated from views / composite rendering. And this is in response to I had a little bit of a rant or whatever about how some of the emulators simulate artifact colors in ways that not only do I not really remember, I kind of have some difficulty in accepting. So at least here, what Kieran is saying is that he's got actual mathematics involved in picking what colors get shown on the XROAR screen. So this is yet again XROAR kind of leading the way for technical accuracy in terms of emulators. And I did take a look at his composite rendering or whatever, and it looks similar, but in my opinion, it looks more correct. Your mileage may vary, I suppose. But, well, if math is on your side, then I think that gives me a nice warm fuzzy. How about you guys?
Yeah, I like Xroar. I think I mentioned that last time because it runs flawlessly on the Mac. And I tend to do, it's a CoCo 2 emulator. It also emulates the Dragon, but I guess I do a lot of CoCo 2 stuff.
Maybe so.
Yeah, well, the CoCo 2 is a good platform.
I think it is. I think it's underrated. I think for a long time, I think the CoCo 3 was like, it's like the most of the people left in the community were kind of CoCo 3 bigots or something.
I like the CoCo 3 as well, but I know we like to use the real hardware versus the emulators anyway. But I still have so much to learn on the CoCo 2 that's keeping me busy.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the next piece of feedback. This comes from Jim Gary. It says, thanks again for a neat program. You're curious about the origin of Robot R29 puzzle game. It is from an old Polish Atari magazine type-in. And here's my blog posting on where I got it from, and he gives the link. I guess you can call me a type-in fanatic.
Yeah, that's cool. He sent a link. That's cool.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jim. Jim does track down all these kind of type-in stuff, and it actually kind of got me interested in some of those books. I think I mentioned the David All simulations book or whatever. I've been picking up some books like that myself with the basic type-in games, and so when I'm old and infirm in the nursing home, at least I can have my CoCo there, and I can be typing in basic games. We'll see how that goes. And the next piece of feedback comes from David Ladd. I think this is in response to we're talking about the Bud Pass disassemblers and how they were DOS-based utilities, and how that is enough to kind of turn me off since I don't use DOS or Windows anyway. David says, one of the things I do for old DOS utilities and games is I use DOSBox. It works really well, and DOSBox is in most Linux distros as well. So DOSBox is a cool program, and it does have good compatibility for running DOS-based stuff, and it's better even than just running DOS in a window or whatever, because you actually can kind of control some things. You can kind of tell it to emulate different kinds of sound hardware or whatever. You have a lot more control over the simulation, and so it's kind of cool for that. That said, it still is a separate environment. It doesn't integrate well with the command line in terms of, like I'm a Unix guy. I like to create long pipe constructs where I'll take 8 different commands and pipe the output of one into the next one and filter and whatever else. And it doesn't work well for DOS stuff in that case. But it is a good point. If you need to use DOS-based stuff, just use the DOSBox application, and it'll solve a lot of problems for you. Moving on to our last piece of feedback. This one comes from Brett Gordon, but he's really talking about William Astle. William, of course, was the man behind the LWSM tool set. But this is talking about, I guess, episode 15, where I talked about some disassembly, code disassembly or whatever. It says, William Astle has an awesome video commentary on how he most masterfully, if I may opine, disassembled Dungeons of Daggerath. And he has a link to the YouTube, and then his HG, which means Mercurial, is a source control system. And his HG or Mercurial repo with very nicely disassembled and extended Dungeons of Daggerath code, and so he's got another link there. So there, if you want further background info on disassembly, or if you want to know more just about Dungeons of Daggerath, there's a couple of links that might help you learn. You gonna go check them out, Neil?
Oh, I already have.
Oh, yeah.
William's a smart guy.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that concludes our feedback segment for this month. Like I said, we would love to hear from you. Send us email, contact us on the Facebook group. Let's say we're going to have to get Mike plugged in on the feedback email as well, I guess. But reach out to us however you have to contact us, and we'd love to hear from you. Send us audio, send us email, send us a link to your YouTube videos, whatever works for you. Let us know how we're doing and what information we're missing, and whatever else. All right, we'll take a little break, and we'll be back with our host discussion.
You are listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast with Neil Blanchard and John Linville. Like how I switched those names around? I'm the original gamer Stevie Stroh, and I'm a Coco Nut. And if you're a Coco Nut too, then visit I'mACoconut.com for all kinds of cool Coco links, including my YouTube gaming videos. So visit I'mACoconut.com, and long live the Coco. Back to you, Neil and John.
All right. Well, let's move on to our host discussion segment. So, I think we mentioned in the news segment kind of the impetus for this discussion, where project kind of picked up on someone else's earlier project, but the person responsible for the earlier project didn't find out about it until after the second project was released. Created a little bit of a dust up, some uncomfortable feelings or whatever. I think probably we can all agree that ideally that would not happen, that ideally, everyone would kind of reach out and make the proper introductions and discuss things and whatever. But, we do live in the real world, and sometimes things don't happen that way. People don't exactly know who everyone is, or sometimes people don't understand or don't know the origins of one project or another. It's also somewhat similar to, and I'm not saying this is not what happened here, but if you had a situation where somebody had been working on a certain project and then someone else comes along later unaware of the first project, and they kind of do the same kind of project on their own but differently or whatever, this is sort of back to the stealing projects discussion I think we had a while back. There's a lot to discuss here. I guess one thing that would be, if you had a fairly clear project, with a license, say, feel free to use this, don't call me, then if you got upset about somebody using it without calling you, obviously that would sort of put you in the wrong, but that's not what happened here. I assume there was no ill intent. I don't know. What do you guys think? What would you have done different, or how do you think things should have been done different? I really don't think anybody intended any ill will. I don't know. Just let me throw it out there. What do you guys think? Somebody pick it up.
Well, I don't think anybody, especially in this case, I don't think they did it obviously on purpose. I mean, especially in the retro community, for example. I mean, it's not really. At least I don't think it's like a cutthroat business. People aren't really trying to pirate or copy someone's project or put it out on something else. It's just miscommunication.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely think it's definitely some miscommunication. I don't, it's a little tougher too, especially if you're looking at a really old program or something that's been around for several years. It's not like there's lots of metadata attached to an 8-bit computer program like today. I mean, even if you have an author's name, what are the chances of you actually finding them and making connection with them? That can be a challenge.
Yeah. I know of somebody who's worked on a project where they're essentially doing kind of what you might call a hostile port. They're kind of porting an old game to the CoCo, but they know that the author is out there of the original game is out there alive somewhere, but for whatever reason unreachable, and they're kind of in a they're kind of in a pickle or whatever. They've got the code kind of written and ready, but they're not willing to move on without the person's sort of consent. But then the person won't talk to them. What do you do in that situation? Do you move on and hope for forgiveness? Do you just not let your stuff be released because the other person, who may be completely unaware of you, just isn't bothering to answer their email? I don't know.
I think in a case like that, it would come down to if you're charging and making money on it as well. That might be another factor.
Yeah. Well, so I agree that might be another factor, but then to tie it back to the case that started the discussion here, if you sell what's really a piece of hardware and then load it up with some software, I think this is part of the original discussion, is you loaded on some software that was kind of freely downloadable, but you kind of made it sort of a selling point of your hardware. Were you you charge some amount for the package. How much of it goes for the hardware? How much of it was only because people only spend it because of the software? Whether the software is supposed to be free or not, you could toss this around a lot of different ways.
Well, I think in the retro computing community, probably more than anything monetary, obviously, is getting credit, which you can't argue that people deserve credit for work that they did, especially if it's only credit. But that probably resolves a lot of these issues. Is there just are so many opportunities where you just are ignorant of knowing who should get credit or acknowledging that. But when I think there's been a good experience when people find that out, that they acknowledge it, and that smooths over a lot of the issues.
That's right.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think Ed has certainly tried to make good in that respect. So again, we're not trying to adjudicate that specific situation. I think everybody there is kind of calmly resolved out to an amicable peace. But just in general, if you do find yourself in such a situation where kind of a misunderstanding has occurred, and just I guess it's just to take the mea culpa and try to be as apologetic or whatever as possible. Try to keep the peace. Now I will say this doesn't always work out. I'm sure you guys probably remember a certain individual on the list a few years ago who became very angry at me over the use of a certain graphics mode in some programs. You remember this? You know what I'm hinting at?
Yes.
And no amount of apologizing or trying to set the record straight was enough to satisfy that person. I'll try to limit my speculation on what that person's real problems were, but sometimes some people are not very reasonable about these things, and I guess at that point you just have to walk away. And if that had been the case of me actually shipping some product that they had developed or whatever, I guess I would have to turn that off and not do it. But in this case, you're talking about knowledge of something that how to do something on a computer. It's like,
yeah, completely different.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Although we do live in a world of software patents, I suppose, but trying to patent software on how to do something on the hardware of a computer from 30 years ago seems at best a bit questionable.
Yeah, definitely. I would just make one more addition as far as talking about etiquette is in this social media world that we live in. I think people often forget that there is such a thing as private email.
Yeah.
Not that I'm faulting anybody. I mean, we've all been guilty of that. It's just easy to fire back immediately a conversation. We don't always realize that, everybody is seeing this, and you can, unintentionally call somebody out in front of everyone for something that, that they weren't even aware that they were doing.
Well, that's probably true too. Yeah. It's probably best to avoid, stirring the pot or whatever the term is. Almost everyone involved is going to be well intentioned. Quite often, people, it's a misunderstanding, or people may not understand exactly where things have come from, or who did what project, or when, or why, or under what terms. There's only so many of us interested in retro computing, so best if we can keep friendly terms with everyone. And I think that's where we are here too. I think everyone's on friendly terms, and things have largely been resolved. Hopefully we're not prolonging any kind of conflict by discussing it. It's just etiquette can be difficult and just in the real life. And, given the fact that probably a lot of people doing retro computing are basically computer kind of people, and computer people are not necessarily well known for their social skills.
That's very true.
Yeah. We may have to be for what we might do.
The other thing I'd like to add in this discussion about putting software on, say, a project like a game cartridge or, one of these boards here is, whether or not the game or the app was, public domain or if it was sold. It's like, even porting an old game from the past, if that game was actually licensed and, sold for money, that's a big difference from, say someone's project that was like, I don't know if the term shareware or public domain, but, I think that's a big difference as well.
Yeah.
Like, something that would come to mind is, you take a game, like that's say Radio Shack sold or, say Steve Bjork comes to mind. He made a lot of games that were, licensed and sold for profit. Well, if you just took those games and just put them on without asking, I think that would get a little dicey.
Yeah, it might. I mean, I don't know how much trouble anybody would really get in. Probably would stop at a cease and desist kind of order, presuming that you actually complied with it, right? But
right, yeah.
If you refuse to comply with a cease and desist, I would think you'd kind of start to be playing with fire a bit.
But like Mike was saying, if they just get a mention.
So we had another situation that was not unlike this. And I forget, it seems like it's been maybe a year or two, maybe it's not even that long, where someone had uploaded some software to the Color Computer Archive that I think the software itself pretty much was freely available, or maybe not, but the author had not put it on Color Computer Archive, someone else did.
Right.
And so that kind of, it's a little bit of a judgment call. Do you remember the situation I'm talking about?
I do.
Yeah. Was the software freely available, or was it pay only software?
It was pay only.
Okay.
And I think that's
so that's more understandable where the author was upset about it.
Yeah. The other thing that gets confusing in the retro community is that, you have the term abandonware, which a lot of companies didn't really care, for software, preserving software and that sort of thing. But then, in this community, you might have someone like, say like Nick Morentis here, he just made this Popstar Pilot game. Well, even though this is on an old machine, he is selling that game. So now if that game disappeared on the Color Computer Archive, that's where it kind of it's not right.
Yeah, well, that might be worth another discussion at some point. It's
true.
We have some amount of software that is being developed nowadays at Homebrew or New Brew or CoCo Brew, some people call it. That it's not old software. It's hobbyist software that nobody really, I doubt if anyone really intends to make a lot of money off of, but some people are charging something for it, including myself.
Yeah, a little bit for your time
and for a variety of reasons. But
right.
At what point does that kind of open itself up to being sort of, if I walked away today, and in a year, could you guys be passing around Farfall, or would it need to be 5 years? Does somebody need to ask me?
Yeah.
Or would it forever be wrong without my permission? Would you need to wait another 15 or 20 years? Would anybody care there anyway? Yeah, I don't know.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the key there is that just like these situations we talked about, when things have been uploaded to the Color Computer Archive, I mean, clearly any author that says no, that shouldn't be there, it gets taken off, and that's the correct response.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like I say, I'm sympathetic to let's archive it, and then if somebody really gets in a snit about it, then take it away. It's not exactly the same situation as loading it on the cartridge or whatever, but it's similar.
The CoCo community has done a pretty good job anytime these have come up. I think they will, for the most part, resolved. And people that are just totally unreasonable, people can see that very easily.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about, too. Oh, Lord.
Yeah, we're talking about that Atari thing that blew up. Oh, it was just terrible.
What's that?
I said I was just referencing an instance at the Atari world, not ours. Nothing to do with the CoCo.
Oh, okay. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, so have we beat this one to death, or is there more to say?
I consider it beaten.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll wrap up this discussion. We'll end this now and take a little break and be back with some of our regular segments.
That's a wrap.
Lovely.
All right, take care.
Hold tight while we pause for the cause.
Okay, but why Tandy Computers? In a word, quality. We do it all, from custom-designed semiconductors to the finished product. Tandy Business Computers are manufactured in our own USA plants. We test and retest and test again to ensure one of the highest standards of quality in the industry. And Radio Shack provides total service and support. I'm convinced.
Tandy Computers at Radio Shack Computer Centers. In business, for business.
All right, welcome back, CoCo Cruisers. This is John, breaking away from all the monotony of talking about silly things like games and people and news and that sort of stuff, and we're going to have some fun talking about a technical topic. Now, if for some reason that's not what strikes your fancy, well, then I may have to encourage you to use the fast forward option on your listening device. Anyway, if you're sticking with us, with me at least, then I'm going to talk a bit about some of the differences between DOS controllers for the Dragon and the CoCo. Now, this topic comes up once in a while. Are CoCo and Dragon cartridges compatible? What does that mean? Well, so of course the cartridge ports on the Dragon and the CoCo are electrically the same. They have the same pinouts. The pins all do the same thing. The CoCo 2 drops the 12 plus or minus 12 volts that the CoCo 1 has, but the parts all pretty much do the same stuff. Now, the cartridges, or the cartridge ports, of course, can have software on board in ROM. Cartridge-based software is going to have the same kind of dependencies as any other software between the CoCo and the Dragon. So, software that uses a keyboard or serial board or something like that, they may seem to run and then not work quite right. The wrong keys need to be pressed on the keyboard, for example. But there are ways around that. For example, if you use the ROM calls for accessing the keyboard, then that all should work just fine. So it is possible to make ROM cartridges that work just fine between the CoCo and the Dragon. Anyway, even if you don't take care of that, they'll still generally run. You just might have to press the wrong keys. So, not ideal, of course, but they are still pretty much compatible. But anyway, DOS cartridges are different even sort of beyond that. And Dragon and CoCo DOS cartridges definitely are not interchangeable, at least not out of the box, shall we say. So the differences span both software and hardware differences. One of the biggest things is that the color basic implementations are different between the CoCo and the Dragon. And so even though they're sort of running effectively the same code, or at least I think it's probably the same code. I haven't actually dug in, but it's certainly seems to be basically the same code. You can do funny things, which I think is what Microsoft did in going in and scrambling the order of the tokens for the commands. So you basically put the commands in different order in a command lookup table, and so then basic programs saved between the two don't work or whatever. But that's not the only tables that there are to scramble, shall we say, in the ROMs. And so I think, I know that when it comes to the disk basic on the CoCo, some of its functionality actually depends on implementing RAM hooks, which I talked about in an earlier episode, where you can actually put code in place of older code, or code in other ROMs will call out through RAM, and you can put your code in those places so that you can modify the way instructions work and that sort of thing. And so, for example, if you have instruction, or if you have basic commands that have a similar or somewhat modified structure when running under disk basic, such as the ones that access file input and output. Part of that is implemented through loose RAM hooks. And so the point I'm getting at is that when you scramble things around, the RAM hook that's useful in Color Basic for doing something probably is not the same RAM hook that's useful in the, well, Color Basic, I guess, on the Dragon, and the one that's useful on the CoCo is not necessarily the one that's useful on the Dragon. So that kind of gets in the way. Beyond that, even if you could, even if that, so basically what happens is, if you stick a Dragon floppy card, which I actually have an original, Dragon floppy controller from the UK, and I'm pretty sure when I stuck it in my CoCo, I basically got nothing, because, it's kind of, it doesn't know what it's talking to and thinks it's doing something and it's not, and so you end up with kind of an unusable mix of the cartridge ROM with the onboard ROM. Even if for some reason that you could get past that, some magic ROM with all the same RAM hooks or whatever, the DOS for the Dragon was written by, I'm not sure who, but not by Microsoft, and so therefore you actually have a different set of commands. So that'd be a little bit unusual, and trying to move to the kind of the foreign DOS. If you're trying to use, say, a Dragon controller in your CoCo or vice versa. And they even use different file formats for program files and that sort of thing. So there's some pretty big differences there, but the main one, of course, comes back to the scrambling with the hooks and tokens and that sort of thing, so that you're just not going to get something that boots up and works. It's just too much of a Frankenstein. But beyond that, even beyond the software differences, there are hardware differences that need to be accounted for. So that you might be thinking, well, I could just pop the software from the Dragon controller into the Tandy floppy controller and be fine. Well, no, that's not going to work either. The biggest difference, or the most obvious difference, is addressing the hardware. So there's basically two things on the pieces of hardware on the floppy controller card. One is the floppy drive controller chip itself, and then there's another. There's a register basically that turns options on and off. It controls which drive select you're using at a given time. That's kind of its most obvious use, but it also enables some of the stuff I'm going to talk about in just a second. The other thing that's different once you get past the addressing difference is the way the two DOSes handle being fast enough to take the data stream off the drive. So basically the disk drive, when it's reading in data, and we're reading in a sector from the floppy disk, is actually running pretty fast in terms of how fast the CoCo can run. And so, you need to be able to get those bytes in as they come, or else you're just going to miss them. So it's effectively a real-time problem. And so to get around, and the code, the normal operation for something like that would be to say, check a status bit, read the data register, store that data into a memory buffer somewhere, and then go back and read the status register for the next piece of data, and just keep going through that, right? Well, it turns out that even a tight loop like that is not good enough. And so I had to come up with some alternatives, and both the Dragon and the CoCo versions are pretty cool ideas, and I'm not really sure if one's superior to the other. You probably could poke a few holes here or there for specific situations, but they're both pretty clever uses of the computer architecture and a melding of hardware and software. So the floppy drive controller has a data request line that with the commands that handle moving data between the controller and the controller chip and the machine itself uses it. There's a line that signals back, when data is available or when data is being requested. And so that piece of hardware is made use of. And so the CoCo version, the controller basically hooks that to the halt line that's available on the cartridge connector. And so the machine, when you go to read or write to the floppy, the machine sets everything up, and then it enables this halt line signaling, and basically halts itself just after it's issued the data access command to the floppy controller. So when the floppy controller has the data available or is ready to receive the data from the machine, this data request line will flip the other way, and so it'll turn off the halt, allowing the machine to proceed. The machine proceeds by moving, to actually read data or write data. It reads data from one place and writes it to the other, and then loops around. And so it's all very carefully set up so that just the right amount of instructions are in place or whatever to account for any special timings. And so the machine basically puts itself in an endless loop of say you're reading a sector. It reads a byte of data from the floppy controller and then writes it to the buffer, and then loops to read the next byte of data. And if you just look at the code, you'd think you just went into an endless loop. But because of this halt line signaling, it at least puts a limit on how fast that runs. It puts it in sync with how fast the floppy controller makes data available or requests data from the machine. So what happens then at the end is the floppy drive controller chip has an interrupt line of its own that then is tied back to the non-maskable interrupt line that's also available through the cartridge port. And so when the command sequence completes, the floppy drive controller actually issues this non-maskable interrupt, which before it started all this stuff, of course, the DOS software had to prepare for. And so when it hits that non-maskable interrupt, the processor executes the non-maskable interrupt handler, which has been set up to know that how to react. It basically means that it's the end of the data operation. It basically it just pops the return address that otherwise it would have returned back into that endless loop, and then it does its return back to the function that called the beginning of the data access command to begin with. Hopefully you're all still awake for all that, but so that's a pretty neat trick with the NMI. The NMI, of course, is basically the only thing that can take precedence over the halt line being held, and so it breaks in and tells the CPU to get back to work, basically. Now, so the Dragon, like I said, it does something a little different. It doesn't have the hardware connected to the halt line, but instead it connects back through the cart line. And the cart, of course, is designed as an interrupt line, and it connects back to the PIA that is able to generate the fast IRQ signal. And so still the data request line from the floppy drive controller on the Dragon hooks back instead of going to the halt line. Now it's going to the cart line, which generates a fast IRQ signal to the CPU. But what the CPU has done is disabled the IRQ signal and instead he uses a sync instruction. And the sync instruction basically just waits in place for the next interrupt to happen, which could be either an IRQ or a fast IRQ, or I guess presumably or an NMI. So it's almost like it halts on that one instruction, similar to the halt signal being used. And so just as the halt line is released as the data comes in on the CoCo, on the Dragon, the fast IRQ is triggered as the data comes in, and the CoCo is already ready for it, having executed the sync instruction, and so that lets it go and execute the next bits of data, which of course is the data pump there, where it reads data from the controller and writes it to the buffer, or reads it from the buffer and writes it to the controller, whichever direction it's going. And then it does that and then pops back around to the next sync instruction. And then once again, the NMI signal is used coming from the floppy drive controller to signal the end of the operation. So both machines are doing something fairly similar, but kind of different. Different enough that the two pieces of hardware don't really work with the same software. So like I said, that's the biggest reasons why, or that's the reason why the DOS cartridges are not interchangeable between Dragon and the CoCo. Not only is it interfacing with a different set of BASIC, a different implementation of BASIC, even though they're both from Microsoft. Even if you got beyond that, the software has to deal with the different kinds of hardware. And like I said, these data pump features are intricately linking features of the hardware to this specific piece of software. It's kind of cool. It's kind of a hack. It's beautiful in that way. Okay, so with that in mind, what would you do if you did want, or if you were stuck with a Dragon and no floppy controller, which a lot of people in the United States are, because a lot of CoCo people in the United States have picked up Tano Dragons, which were available for sale brand new out of the box. May still be, certainly until fairly recently, if not still, again, they might still be available. But that source did not provide floppy controllers. And of course, Tandy floppy controllers are not too hard to find, and in some ways might be easier than ever, since a lot of people nowadays don't want floppies at all, so therefore aren't using their floppy controllers. So, what can be done? Can you make a floppy controller for the CoCo work on the Dragon, or vice versa? So, short answer is that yes, it's at least somewhat possible, but how do you go about it? So, if you wanted to hack up something, you're starting with the software. Probably the easiest thing to do is take the DOS ROM that's sort of native to the machine you want to work on, and then hack it to support the hardware on the controller that you're able to get. And so the good news is this work has already been done, at least in terms of getting the Dragon DOS, or DOS Plus, I guess it is, working on a Tandy controller. I'm not sure if there's any way to get to the CoCo DOSes working on a Dragon controller, but at least over here, Dragon controllers are a lot harder to find. They don't exactly seem to be falling out of trees in Europe either. But anyway, that can be done. You basically can change that little data pump section I was talking about of the ROM to use the alternative hardware access, and that should mostly work. Of course, you also have to account for the addressing differences between the chips, or between the cards, but that's nearly trivial. So there, it can be done. I think we probably can find a link to at least someone who's done that, and probably stuff that in the show notes. Beyond that, if you wanted to get a little deeper and we'll do some hardware stuff, well, one thing you could do that's sort of a hardware hack, maybe, before I get into the hardware stuff, if you do hack, say, you hack the Tandy, or say you hack a Dragon DOS to work with a Tandy controller, That'll work for a lot of stuff. Certainly work for basic. It probably is not going to work, or almost certainly will not work, if your application or game decides to access the floppy controller directly. This is the same problem that people have with emulators or using hard drive controllers on the CoCo, or whatever. It's just a kind of a hard reality. If you're just hacking software, you have to hack all the software. How big an issue that is, I'm not really sure. One thing I noticed, at least if you're trying to run Dragon software, is a lot of Dragon software seem to have primarily been cassette based anyway. But in which case, why do you need the floppy controller? I don't know. I'm rambling now, so just wanted to mention that you may not be solving all your problems if you just use a purely software solution to making this work. So, moving on to a hardware hack. Well, one hardware hack that's still basically a software hack is you could have a switchable ROM. You could do a ROM replacement with a switch to access, where the switch just controls one address line on your ROM, and you basically have a double-sized ROM with a sort of a 2-in-1, where you have the Tandy ROM and the Dragon ROM on one controller, probably a Tandy controller. And then your controller would work both with your CoCos and with your Dragons. And like I said, with the caveat on the Dragon that if you try to run Dragon software that directly accesses the floppy drive, it's not going to work. And that probably would include, say, OS 9 on the Dragon. So if you try a hack like that, your mileage may vary. That may or may not be exactly what you want to do. Now, if you wanted to actually hack, say, a Tandy controller to actually be hardware-wise a Dragon-style controller, there's the two main things you need to do, and that's one is you need to account for the addressing difference, where the difference between where the floppy controller chip and the option or drive select register are. They're, like I said, they're in reverse places between Tandy and Dragon. That's a fairly simple hack to pull off, changing where addresses are. I won't go into further details. If you're capable of doing it, that's probably all you need to know, is to be reminded that it could be done. So switching the addresses should be fairly simple. The other part where you're going to have to switch basically whether the data request line from the floppy drive controller is being used to drive the halt line or the cart line. That doesn't sound very difficult at first. It sounds like, first impression would be that you just would cut a line and put a switch in and cross them over depending on which way the switch is set. If you try to pursue that, definitely you're going to need to take a close look at the schematics for the floppy controllers. It looks like I know the Tandy controller has to use a little extra hardware to make sure that the halt line gets disabled when the data operations are completed, and there might be some other more subtle things involved. So your mileage may vary as for how difficult it will be if you try to hack the hardware and when it gets to switching the halt and the cart lines. It may not be hard at all. It might be something you could just switch around. I didn't look deeply enough into it because it's not a project I've actually done. So again, it's an idea. It could be done. Some amount of hardware applied. Some amount of hardware and cleverness. But, your mileage may vary, so good luck. Let me know if you do it. Love to hear about it. All right, so let's say you are in this situation. You've got a Tano Dragon. You're in the U.S. You're covered in Tandy floppy controllers, but you can't get a Dragon floppy controller to save your life. So what do you do? Well, it turns out that the CoCo SDC device that has come on the market over the past few years, which is a cool device that writes to SD cards, but on the software side basically looks like a floppy controller. Well, it turns out there's some support in there for looking like either a Tandy floppy controller or a Dragon floppy controller. So if you really need a floppy controller for your Dragon, you can just go and use a CoCo SDC. You will have to load it with, a Dragon version of DOS that has the commands added to make the CoCo SDC useful. So, which is sort of like the Dragon equivalent of the SDC DOS or whatever that's being shipped with CoCo SDC. That is for the CoCos. Anyway, no surprise there. You're going to have something that can control, the internal features for selecting different disk images and that sort of stuff. But if you need something for your Dragon, that's probably one of the best possible alternatives. Certainly it's something that's been popular in the CoCo community. So anyway, if you're interested in a Tandy controller that's been modified to work with the Dragon, either in a switch over completely or in a switchable where it works with both the CoCo or the Dragon, depending on which way you flip the switch. These are actually available right now. Ian Maverick, who I think I know is one of the hosts of the Trash Talk podcast, he has them. I've seen them available on eBay. He has a website available as well, and he's pricing them, I think, $110 for the one-way conversion to Dragon and $120 or maybe it's $130 for the switchable version. Anyway, Ian's a great guy. I'm sure he does good work. If you're interested in that, having that, you probably want to contact him. Like I said, I think that's going to be fine until you try to use something on your Dragon that actually accesses the hardware physically, because I think all he is doing is a ROM swap with a hacked ROM. I don't think he's actually switching the hardware itself. So, how useful that is, well, your mileage may vary. And of course, the final option is to build your own, and either build your own, like I said, with a switchable ROM, or you could take up my challenge there on the more advanced hacking, where you hack out the addressing and then hack out the switch between the cult and the cart lines. And see if you can make that work. I would love to hear from somebody who can make that work, hacking one of the Tandy controllers to physically be a Dragon controller, using the cart line instead of the halt line. That'd be really cool. I haven't seen anybody who claims to do that. That might already be out there, and I'm just not finding it. Like I say, the Dragon guys tend to go off and hide on their own website sometimes, so some of their cooler stuff gets a little harder for me to find. But well, that's about it. That's probably plenty of talking. So there's your answer. Basically, in general, CoCo and Dragon cartridges are electrically compatible. They should plug in and work for some definition of work. There are differences between the hardware that are you'll often see in terms of keyboard differences or whatever. There are ways around that if the software is written to account for that. But even if they don't account for that, quite often the software will still run in terms of putting stuff up on the screen or whatever. You might have to hit a different key than what's specified, a W instead of an H, or I don't know exactly what the mappings are, but so that's not so good, but it might be useful in some circumstances. I don't know. It's also the kind of thing that's not too hard to hack around if you're convenient, or if you're handy with an EEPROM reader and the disassembler. Anyway, but beyond that, DOS cartridges definitely are not directly interchangeable between the CoCo and the Dragon. There are some, I don't know if profound, they're almost subtle in some ways, but definitely distinct differences. The software is different, and the software has to be different because the hardware is different. There are some ways around all these things, Might make for 2 or 3 different variations on cool projects, but that's what they are. They're projects. If you are looking for a floppy controller for your Dragon, there are some options available. Whether or not they solve all your problems will probably depend on what your problems are. All right. Well, remember, as I like to say, you can only be young once, but you can be retro forever, or even CoCo forever. All right. Talk to you later.
Remember the first time you used a computer? The CoCo impacted many lives and is still impacting lives today. CoCo Fest isn't about the collective, it's about the individual. It's about you. Your story, your experience, your passion. What are you waiting for? Haven't you waited long enough? Join us at the CoCo Fest in Lombard, Illinois, April 22nd and 23rd, 2017. CoCo Fest. Become part of the equation.
Welcome to our roundtable session. The theme of this talk here is that it's 6 months until CoCo Fest. Actually, to the weekend. I think we're right 6 months out from CoCo Fest 2017 or in April of 2017. The thought here is just to get some CoCo folks together, talk about what projects they're working on, maybe what products they're preparing, and it can rumble from there to things going on in the community and just about anything really. We've got 4 or 5 people on the line here. That's pretty good, I think. And who wants to drive this? And Neil, Mike, you got any thoughts on an agenda to pursue here, or you just want to do or talk around, or what? And why don't you guys tell us what you guys have been up to today? I know you've been off for some retro goodness.
We had a good morning, actually. We started off, went for breakfast, and I took Mike to a Reuse It center here in my area. And they got a whole bunch of retro computer goodness in there.
Yeah, it was a good time. We had they had all kinds of 80s computers there, as well as old radios, very old televisions. They had some Marconi televisions. They're pretty neat.
Wow, that's pretty cool. You guys pick up any new ideas for CoCo Fest projects? Any new acquisitions for getting ready for CoCo Fest or anything like that?
This is Mike. I've been brainstorming a little bit, but I'm not ready to divulge what it is.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Anyone else? Nick, I know, is on the line. I hear he has some sort of new product release that everyone's talking about. You want to say anything about that, Nick?
Yes. I'm just finished posting all the orders for Popstar Pilot. So they're all in transit and should be arriving anything from in 10 days' time to 10 years. Who knows how, with the Postal Service, how reliable it is. So that was quite a big job. The last 2 months I spent just packing up all the putting the packages together, writing the CDs, writing the floppy disks, managing the database of customers and all that. And anyway, I've finished, so now I can take a rest, I guess.
Yeah. How many floppy disk versions did you end up copying out?
Well, it's about 50 have gone out, packages altogether. Half of those were floppy disks.
Oh, wow.
I was surprised, yeah. I think I get the impression that some people were collecting, ordered the floppy disk one because it's a collectible.
Sure.
Even though most people have got access to whether it's a CoCo SDC or DriveWire, I think having the real 5 1/4 inch disc, whether it's blank or not, probably doesn't matter. As long as the disc that says Popstar Pilot, that's a collectible.
Yeah,
that's the impression I got. And it was quite a drama for me, actually, because I before I started, I had about 10 boxes of as new unopened floppy disks to use. So I thought there won't be any problem, and besides, there shouldn't be that many people ordering it. As it turned out, there was a lot of people ordering it, and most of my disks were unreadable. So I was struggling to find enough disks to actually distribute the 5 1/4 on. Eventually, after a long time formatting, reformatting, doing backups, verifications, I did find enough disks to at least ship out all the floppies as operating disks. So that's done. But it certainly is something to think about in the future, because 5 1/4 disc media is got a very limited future as far as distribution goes. The discs that you find are not brand new. They're not in good quality, and they're just not reliable. So yeah, there has to be a better way to distribute software. So I chose the CD, but hopefully everyone's got access to one, a CD drive, and two, can transfer a DSK to a color computer.
Yeah, well, congratulations on the game and getting it out. Everybody's looking forward to it. It's going to be great when you receive those. And I guess next time for your next release, you just need to send a disc label.
Yes, that's right. I did consider that. Originally, I thought I'll just send an envelope with an instruction manual. I can email the DSK and I can send a label, like you say. But then I thought, well, what's the fun in that? It just doesn't. It's not real if it's not on real media, in a real box or packaging of some sort. It just isn't the real thing. So I just ended up going for a DVD case with a CD and a floppy disk.
Reach out to us next time, because we Verbatim still makes brand new discs here in the States.
Do they actually manufacture them, or are they just old stock?
They still actively manufacture 5 1/4 and 8 inch.
Wow, and 8 inch, gee. Maybe I should distribute one on 8 inch as well, just for laughs.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
That would be cool. Yeah, so I wonder what the quality is. I mean, I guess I've heard it asserted that the new diskettes you could get in the mid or late 90s were not as good as the diskettes you could get in the late 80s or early 90s. I wonder if that just was a temporary thing, or if it's somehow carried through to. I mean, I would have to think if you're still making new diskettes today, you've got to be servicing a very specialized customer set. Maybe those U.S. nuclear missile silos we heard about a few months back. Hopefully they're putting their best quality work on those, but I guess it's hard to say.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. A lot of the discs I threw out were actually verbatim. So.
But, yeah, so even the optical media that you chose, that's probably got a timestamp, an expiration date on its lifespan as well.
That's right. Well, they're CDRs, so they're not actual press discs. So CDRs have a limited life as well, but hopefully people will back up their files before they do fade. But if they do lose it, well, they just have to email me and I'll send them a DSK. That's all right.
Yeah, well, that's cool. Looks like
Jim O'Keefe just joined. Jim, he's got a mode set up so you have to press the space bar while you talk.
Can you hear us, Jim?
Jim's on a cell phone, so I'm not sure how he's going to talk. And that looks like Wally just joined.
So who all's on?
Yeah, there's Wally. Wally, yeah, of course, John's here. Neil and Mike are here. Nick Marentis is on. John Strong is on. It looks like Jim O'Keefe is on, but I haven't heard him speak yet. And we've also got Mark Overhauser is on. Mark, I know you're from Facebook, but have you ever been to CoCo Fest?
No, I haven't yet. I've only been doing CoCos for a couple of years now.
Yeah. Do you think you might make CoCo Fest this year?
Probably not. Mainly cost.
Yeah. I understand. Well, definitely encourage you to come out and join us. Should be fun. But Wally, we'll get back to you now. What have you been up to? Are you? I assume we'll see you at CoCo Fest again this year.
Well, I hope to be there. I can't remember the last time I missed one, but I'm hoping to be there.
You made Neil the beneficiary of a deal he couldn't refuse on your CoCo system last year. Do you have more CoCo stuff at home, or?
I do, and I'll probably, if I can get my act together, I'll probably have another CoCo setup similar to last year that I can bring. I accumulated so much stuff through the years; it's unbelievable. And I do have a 6309 CoCo setup, and if I can get all that together, I'll bring it this year and maybe put it up for grabs.
Oh yeah, well, that sounds cool. Now, so Wally, you're in Ohio, right?
Yeah, Cleveland.
Yeah. You familiar with Chillicothe?
Yeah, that's down by the river. That's down southern part of the state.
Yeah,
I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard, but we're looking at having an alternative or another CoCo Fest like event next year in October in the Chillicothe area. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that as well.
Oh, that's just a short. Well, not short, but it's a lot shorter than Chicago. That'd be great. And I tell you, that's a very interesting part of the state down there. That's a lot of Indian country down there. There's very interesting stuff in that area of Ohio.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
Very nice area.
We probably need to do more research on the local area there. I know as far as driving through it, it's sort of a lot of nothing on the road, and then a town, and then a lot more nothing, and then you start to get into Dayton and some of the other areas that are a little more populated.
Yeah. It's kind of a nice, very rural, and it's you're starting to get into the hills down there, but it's that's a nice area.
Far from Hocking Hills.
Well, Hocking Hills, that's a gorgeous area. That maybe is the nicest area in Ohio. That is just beautiful there. But this is more. You don't have the gorges and the valleys like you have at Hocking Hills and the cave type thing. This is it's a very nice area, and a lot of historic stuff down there with the ancient Indians. Very, very interesting stuff. And there's Indian burial grounds in that area. It's pretty neat.
Well, that's cool. We may need to come up with a visitor's guide or something before we get to our.
What prompted you to choose that area?
Oh, well, basically, it turns out it's essentially halfway between me and Neil. Uh-huh. And it's kind of pretty close to where I've been making a way stop when I go to CoCo Fest. And and so that's how I kind of learned about it anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, but
that'd be good. I definitely hit that.
Yeah. Well, so we definitely love CoCo Fest, and we don't want to take anything away from it, but we're kind of eager to maybe have some other events to go to. And so we're looking at that. We're going to call it Tandy Assembly, or at least that's the working title. And it'll be a Tandy-oriented event. We're hoping to bring in some of the Z80 folks. And if we can find Pocket Computer folks or Tandy 1000 folks or whatever to join us as well, I think we'd like to welcome them into the fold as well.
Well, that'd be a lot of fun. That'd be great.
Mm.
And it's halfway between Chicago Fest. So, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, anyway, John Strong, we haven't brought you in much to talk. What are you doing now? Are you working on something for CoCo Fest? I know you've got a couple of projects you've been talking about.
Yes. First of all, I hope to have at least one controller project done for the CoCo Fest. Maybe more, but at least something for a new controller for people to do. Of course, I'm continuing to do the different cases for different projects, and that happens all year round.
Are people contacting you in advance when they design something, or are they just designing the hardware and then hoping you'll design the case for it?
Well, it's starting to do in advance now, okay?
Yeah.
Sometimes not quite enough in advance. But Jason, with his MIDI pack, I did get it before anybody else, but then I've had some issues with the printer and plastic, so just a couple minor ones to solve, so that should be make an announcement that was available real soon. I was hoping maybe this weekend to be able to make that announcement, but had to go get some more plastic and ran out of plastic. And so we have those projects going on that there. I have hopefully 2 new games at the minimum for CoCo Fest is my goal.
2?
One I've talked about a little bit and previewed and showed. I need to get set down and just focus on that and actually get it finished. And then I have another one that, again, Neil is my playtester on it. Really don't want to talk about it too much yet because I want to kind of be a surprise closer to it, what the actual game is. But I will say it's not a puzzle game, which is a lot of my games have been. It is an arcade game. It is I would guess it'd be called, I would consider it a platformer. Would you agree, Neil?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And I've just finished first pass on the layout, not first pass, but it's a hopefully final pass on the background graphics, and working a little bit on the sprites, and just started coding on it. May start on a level editor for it this weekend if I get enough time. It will be a separate level editor because the particular game doesn't make sense to be able to edit the levels in game. And again, I'm targeting a cartridge, so that also makes level editors a bit more difficult to do. Because to really make that work, you're going to have to put on extra non-volatile memory on the cartridge.
Sure, that makes sense.
And I don't think this game really needs that. Okay, so I'm not looking on doing that for this particular game. I don't think it's really needed. There's some games I definitely think we're going to need to do that in the future, but this particular one's not. But I think it's going to be a good change from the puzzle games I've done, and we're going to have to be a little bit tighter on my code.
Yeah.
And, puzzle games, I've got some unique stuff, but the focus of the puzzle games is on the puzzle logic, okay, and getting that down. And I do write a lot of the routines as if they have to be a really fast arcade game, but I don't really go through and optimize the code in a puzzle game simply because I don't need to. Because it's simply running faster than what it needs to run anyway. So no use of spending that extra time, optimizing it when it's not needed and when I can do another project. In this case, I may need to do some optimization. Some of the sprites are going to be pretty big, so I'm going to have to see what I'm going to do with that. Of course, I do have a sprite compiler, but might have to rework on that a little bit to do that. But I think people will enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
It's not, and Nick, it's not going to be I don't think it's as intensely challenging game in the same way that your Popstar Pilot is. on pushing stuff. See anything that I'm doing really outstandingly new or really a lot of tricks being pulled in. I know Nick did a lot of things with the palettes and switching and things like that. And this is not quite that complicated a game. I think it's a fun game. I think it's a game that we need to have on the color computer just to say it can be done.
Cool is going to be on a cartridge.
Yes, the goal is right now is for it to be on a cartridge.
And you're targeting the CoCo 3?
Yes, I'm targeting the CoCo 3.
Cool.
And so I've been running some of the numbers and what it might take, and I think my sprites are going to be the biggest memory grabbers. Okay?
Yeah.
Because one character is pretty big. That's kind of the issue there. If I make sure I make that move fast enough. It is basically my version of another game that exists out there in machines. So again, Nick, you did totally original. Great job. This will have maybe some original twists to it. But when you look at it and you play, it's, oh, okay, that's basically X game for the color computer, which is okay. We need both. And
it's true.
And so that's kind of the other game is again, it's targeted for the a cartridge and actually runs now from a cartridge. I just need to finish the levels and the title screens and the controls. And I have a Dr. Mario clone. And,
cool.
And I just need to sit down and finish it. I was thinking about putting Orchestra 90 on the card, but people's already made some Orchestra 90 clones, and so I don't think maybe I need to do that now. And I've got some cool ideas for that one, for the game cart. If I can pull it off on my 3D printer, that will be kind of really unique. That's the problem with doing something cool. You have to come up with something cooler the next time.
Yeah, that definitely can be a problem.
And so I really think the Bomb Squad was a good, cool game cart. I think the carts you guys make are cool too. It's just my cart fit the game, and so that's kind of the reason for doing it. But,
sure.
And like I said, I think I have some ideas if I can pull it off, and if I can get my printer to print it. I do have a little vintage. I did invest in another 3D printer for the stuff. Yeah, well, with the mini MTI, I've already shipped 15 cases to Ed, and he's got almost 35 people on the waiting list. So it takes a lot of time, and one printer it takes a long time to print all those. We went ahead and bit the bullet and bought one, and the good part is it actually seems to do a much better print than my previous one in some cases.
Well, that's good. Technology is improving.
Right. Oh, in fact, we're talking about the joystick stuff. I've been trying to make a little handle for the little thumbstick joystick control modules that you find out there on the web.
Yeah.
When I did it with my old one, it's like, oh, there's this big groove in the side. Well, yeah, I'll never, I might be able to make one for me, but it's not any quality I can sell. With the new one, the big groove's not there. And so it looks much nicer. It does that. It's got an extra fan on there that helps some overlap and hanging. The bad point is it's another learning curve because it's using different software within the machine. And therefore, I can tell which machine it was printed on because it does things differently. So still not ready for prime time, but closer than what it was previous. And but opens some possibilities up for me that at least make it easier to do some things that I'm hoping to do.
From the CoCos, they called me this morning and said they were doing it. So
I missed the first part of that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was Jim. I was unmuting him to see if he had something to say, but I think he's talking to somebody else.
Oh, okay. All right.
Talking to you.
Jim, are you there?
Yeah. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, Jim. Sorry, I had you muted because there was some background noise on your line.
Hey, John, you there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. I'm not used to all this fancy stuff,
That's high tech stuff.
And we're winning 4-0 in the fifth inning. So
all right.
So they have to to go into the World Series. So
awesome.
I didn't allow them to record this, and then when you guys were talking, they wouldn't let me. They were, I couldn't activate my mic. I had to come back in. Yeah. So how's everybody?
Right.
I hear Wally's on.
Yeah.
John, good to see you guys.
Yeah.
I think John should bring his 3D printer with him next, so we can see it operate. Making a
that
case.
Might be kind of cool.
And then he could have like a raffle or something like that for that case that was made at the CoCo Fest.
I've thought about bringing it to the CoCo Fest, and the new one would actually be a lot easier to do it with, even though it's the same size. The old one, you're supposed to be able to print from the SD card, but I found out really quickly that feature was not very well done. On the new one, it apparently it's using an ARM processor instead of something a lot less powerful in the old one, and it prints great off the SD card. And,
great.
And it's also got Wi-Fi built into it, which I haven't tried yet. And I think it's getting on about a month I've had it. But I've been running mini MPI cases on it and things like that. So it's been.
I think it'd be neat if you did like a time lapse video, put it out there on YouTube. It'd be kind of cool to see a high speed
cool.
print.
I've thought about that, and it's something I might do in the future. As currently, it's either like it's feast or famine on when I'm doing stuff. Either I'll go a few weeks and there be nothing, and then I'll get 3 or 4 people who want stuff. It's like I gotta get it all done at once, and you really can't make anything in advance because you don't know how many things are there. You don't want to be sitting on a bunch of plastic and in cases that you're going to sit there, and you put all that time in. Now, I did make an exception this time because I know Ed has a waiting list, and his products are real popular. So I did, after I shipped him his first batch, I kept on printing. So I have another batch ready if and when he wants them to ship to him on the mini MPI. And
that's cool.
And so they're ready here. I think they're all well. I've got to put a couple of them together. I screw them and put them together with the screws in. So make sure they've got the proper number of screws with it and such, and package them in a baggie with the switch things and the support. That way I know, hey, it's all here. And when I ship them to him, I throw a few extra of the switch covers in case one gets lost or something like that, or one has a flaw that I missed. So he's got plenty to ship out to people.
Yeah, so it sounds pretty cool. Sounds like you have a process there. Maybe you should consider doing a seminar related to designing the cases or case production or something like that. Kind of.
Well, yeah, I've kind of thought about that. And so much of it's non-CoCo on it, but I've got so many ideas on the CoCo that I want to present this year that I'd rather do those. And because you guys, if that was to the Midwest Vintage Computer Fair, know that I've got some joystick designs, I've got a trackball design I'm working on, and it's kind of Pacific CoCo related, and just trying to do everything is kind of hard.
Sure.
Yeah.
You need to hire a staff to help you.
Well, just about, and then.
So who's winning?
Go Cubs, go!
and besides my day job. Fortunately, my wife likes going to the CoCo Fest.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
And
so what other seminars and stuff do people want to talk? What do people want to talk about at CoCo Fest, or what do they want to hear about at CoCo Fest? Anybody got ideas and things they'd like to request people to talk about, or their own proposals they would like to talk about?
Well, I'll go ahead and speak up. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead, John.
Well, I've just been talking so much. Anybody else, I want to do some on game development and stuff. And I might do on controller development, which might be some of the 3D stuff. But at least game development, introduce a couple new games and talk about developing. And some of my tools, because I keep upgrading my tools and stuff. And Neil's been seeing some results of that. And and also be aware that just the two that I said that I'm really pretty sure is going to be available. There's others in various stages of development. And, and Neil challenged me for something, and so I've been looking at it, and so far I think it's doable. That's probably good news to Neil. And so that's kind of the deal is there. I want work up some excitement about I'm excited that people developing software. And I forget his name right now. I should remember the gentleman that presented at BCF Midwest. And Evan, okay, Evan White, and I think I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, edit it out. He's talking to you about when you make a cartridge, because he accidentally sent me the files.
Okay. That's a good way to learn about it.
Yeah. And which I'm excited about that. I want to see that. And we know that there's another balancing ball in the works, and Taylor's doing some really cool things on the other one of the emulators, and not the emulators, but the Field Programmer Great Systems. And I am supposed to be getting one of his systems, the Nanomates, at some point in time. He just announced that he started on the analog board, and we were waiting on getting me the boards to do a case for that till he had the analog board, so it's kind of stable design. And so there's I think a lot going on here, just to talk about what I see from my side.
Well, there's never any shortage of news each month, that's for sure. But like you say, some news, people talking about their projects, whatever. But we still want people to come to CoCo Fest and talk about the stuff in person, and whether it's talking about a product they're developing, or just talking about their own project, or how they, built their own, star tracker or astronomy hut or whatever. Any kind of thing that the people are working on. We want them to come to CoCo Fest and tell us about it, or come check things out. Whether or not they're making something that's available for sale, or if they just want to come and hang out, or come and market their old CoCo systems like Wally.
The more involved, the better.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'd like to get Nick up in the middle of the night to do some presentation to CoCo Fest. That would be cool.
That would be cool. Or we need to figure out how to get him to come and join us.
Yeah, it's a bit expensive to fly all the way to Chicago from Australia.
They got you over here once. I met you. But that was Pennsylvania.
Yeah, even if we do it over Blue Jeans, it'd be nice to get a presentation,
Yeah, that would be cool.
It's a possibility.
Yeah, that's what I meant about keeping you up in the middle of the night to the CoCo Fest time.
Yeah, we could probably organise something.
Even if you just talked about the travails of getting the Popstar Pilot package all assembled and shipped out, that would be everybody would be quite interested in it.
Well, that's right. Yeah, I don't know which was harder, writing the game or packaging the game at the end.
Exactly. There's a lot of bits and pieces work that goes into that besides just the programming.
You have to stuff the packages in the kangaroo pouches to get them off to the post. That's all really the hard part, right?
Well, like in mine and John's case, we've got to shrink wrap them, get the cartridges, and burn the EEPROMs. Yeah, John, I'm going to have to send you some tag hangers or something. You know,
That's okay. That's okay.
Can't have you hanger provide challenged for much longer. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm not even sold on the shrink wrapping for sure anymore, but we'll see. Oh, yeah, I need to get on the stick. I have a couple of ideas, but nothing that I've sold on, and so I'm not currently working towards any specific project. My retro challenge project is not a CoCo thing at all. I'm building a cosmic elf. Learning how to wire wrap, that's no fun really, but it's kind of fun, but it's sort of fun in a masochistic sort of way.
I got to where I actually had a gun, okay, wire wrapping gun that was okay, so that's long been misplaced, who knows where. But it gets to be a bit of work. And actually, my first machine was a Cosmic Elf, and built up on a solderless breadboard is how I built the first one.
So anyway, I need to get back into a CoCo project, hardware and or software or both. The podcast itself is kind of a project. It takes up a certain amount of the time that might otherwise go to product development or whatever the term would be. And then the other part that goes is the eBay acquisitions.
Why don't you run a podcast from the fest itself?
Go Cubs! Go Cubs!
Oh, sorry. We probably could do that. I kind of toyed with the idea of doing that last year. We ended up with doing the kind of the joint session with Steve Strobridge and Curtis Boyle. But that's something a lot of other retro events kind of do with their podcasters. Will get together and do kind of a joint podcast or something like that. I think the biggest reason keeping us just from doing a podcast recording there is just doing the preparation and whatever kind of just takes away from us just being there and enjoying the event. We probably could do something like this with a recording session that would bring in some participants. I don't know. I don't have anything against that. Just would have to talk to Neil or Mike or whoever and see what they think about it. Jim's still listening to the game there, I think. Well, let's see. Well, so we mentioned, of course, we've been talking some about CoCo Fest. We mentioned to Wally about our Tandy Assembly. Has anybody got any random thoughts on Tandy Assembly? Sound like a good idea to you guys, or is it silly? Or
well, I think it sounds doable. Again, it's in an area that's not too far away from a lot of us who do support the color computer, and we would definitely try to make it. If we could possibly do so, and support that. I mentioned my wife. She said, "Oh, cool." And from this side, it doesn't look like anything too silly to me. Because,
good.
I'm a game programmer for a computer that hadn't been made in how many years? I think Nick knows that feeling as well as you do, John.
Yeah, a long time. Yeah.
And did make me think of one other thing, and I need to shut up and give some other time, is I actually think of doing this arcade game and actually doing a version on it for the program Gatorway systems. So I'm seriously considering, having it available in a special version for them, maybe using the more colors or higher resolution that they have. Just so we can say, hey, if the CoCo did this is what it could have looked like.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I like my stuff to run on the CoCo, and I want something there, and that would always be the first priority. Just out of curiosity to see what it would do. It's kind of a curiosity thing.
Sure. Yeah, we haven't done a lot of coverage on the FPGA stuff. We kind of mentioned a few things at different kind of milestones or whatever, but I don't know. We probably should have some discussion at some point of what at what point is it not a CoCo, or is it still a CoCo? Is it different from a CoCo? That sort of thing. I think that's probably worth some discussion at some point. But that definitely is a problem, right? When you go off, you add extra hardware features or whatever, and that might be cool to play with from a programming standpoint or whatever. But if nobody programs for them, they're kind of pointless, right?
Exactly. And this is the thing, that I've done some talks a little bit, not as much as I may need to do with some of the people involved with these. And
interesting to see the number of people that actually have those and are using them.
Yes, that will be, a big thing, and that's also one of the things of like saying, okay, I got the game logic developed, okay, all right, well now I have to just redo the graphics, for the more colors or a higher resolution, do some modifications and see what it does, because at some point in time, we're going to start, I've got 2 dead CoCo 3s here right now that I need to fix. And besides the working one, having a replacement when you can't get, another one's a good idea, but it's not the same as the original.
Well, the one thing that's interesting about the FPGA versions is they're fast enough that people that know how to program in BASIC could actually, make something playable. Would be really slow on the normal CoCo. So it is kind of intriguing. Plus having the extra colors and resolution.
Yeah, to me, it's not so much the extra speed, though that's nice if I want to go ahead and do the development on it instead of compiling on emulator on the PC. And I know Nick does straight purist when he does his assembly on a CoCo, but I do it cross-platform. But I'm actually running the emulator, and it's running the assembler, EdTASM in the emulator. So I still have my ties there to the CoCo when I'm doing it all. But, it might be fast enough. I might be satisfied with the other on doing it on one of the other machines and then make sure it runs on the CoCo. And but I put my 2 cents in, I think, as well as Nick did, that the machine that Taylor's working on, that it definitely needs, standard CoCo joystick support to feel like a CoCo. Again, I'm long-winded. I need to mute and let somebody else talk.
I think the problem with the FPGA color computers is that there's not enough people who own it. So I, for one, if I was to sit down and write an FPGA game that uses the extra colors and extra speed and all that, I would only be writing it for half a dozen people. And that's a lot of work for just a half a dozen people. Whereas I'd prefer to still write for the largest market to suit a standard, for a standard color computer, which is what most people around the world would have. So yeah, from that point of view, I've got an FPGA CoCo, but I haven't quite warmed up to it yet. I still use my original.
I have a question for Nick.
Yep.
Did John say you're still programming? You're using for the on the color computer? You're writing that stuff on it, or are you doing a cross-platform?
No, totally on the color computer.
Okay, all right. I was wondering.
Old school.
Yeah, because the stuff I'm using when I'm working on it, I'm on a laptop, and I'll use VCC, but I'm using EdTASM, disk EdTASM, and it's the recompiles are slow, but still I enjoy doing it that way.
I just like using the actual hardware. It just reminds me of that I'm using a color computer, rather than typing on a PC keyboard. It just doesn't feel right. That, or I'm extremely stupid.
Not likely.
Well,
Jim, are you working on this project you want to talk about?
Well, I got two things. One's a hardware, one's software. This hardware, and this is just for me because, I love disk drives, and
right.
As much as good as the SDC is, and Cloud9's controller, whatever, I forget what that's called.
Super IDE.
The Super IDE, right? I love that too, but I want to be able to. So, anyways, the little Gotex.
Oh yeah.
Floppies.
The floppy replacements.
Right, the floppy replacements. They'll have an SD card in it, but they're a single floppy drive. They cost about $30 on eBay, and then you get the software from some guy in France, I think, and he'll configure it so that it'll operate as a Tandy drive, and that's $10 for each one you do. So it's about $40. And I just want to. I'm not sure if it's which one of the if it's doing DMK or any of the others, but I want to get that running on a CoCo. So then I can have a real drive, and then I can have this drive, and I can just do stuff like that. That's what I'm looking for. Maybe 3 of those drives, and then a real floppy. That's just for me, and because I think on the SDC you can't. What's the limitation on that? You can't use the Neil, what's the limitation on that? You remember? That was my problem.
Yeah, you're only limited to 2 drives.
That's it, right? You're only limited to the 2 drives. Yeah, and I want to have that extra 3rd drive, and because that's the other part of the thing. See, I'm still working on my disc version of ColorForth. That.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and actually, I got quite. I'm quite moving along. I'm doing some windowing because I'm using an 80-column screen, and the old Forth was 64 by 16, which would give you 1024 blocks. So what I want to do is I want to put a block in the upper left corner of 64 by 16, and then I can put another 8 lines of 80 column down below that I can use for entry or something like that. And then on the side, I'm going to put like stacks or registers or something like that. And then I'll just use it. Then I'm going to write a full screen editor in Forth instead of a line editor. Mm-hmm. I'm using an old line editor from Figforth right now, and it's not fun. So I'm looking for it. Yeah. But
that's cool. Doing, those would make great topics to talk about at a CoCo Fest or a Tandy Assembly or both.
Yeah. Well, I plan on going to the Tandy Assembly, so yeah, mark me down for that. Yeah, I'll bring a Model 4 with me, and might even bring an Apple.
And we'll put you down for the Saturday night singing contest as well.
There you go.
Yeah, you'll win.
Mike Rowan's got to sing with me. Mike Rowan's a pretty good singer. You ever hear Mike sing? Yeah, he's a pretty good singer.
Awesome.
Well, how likely is there to be the assembly?
I think it's a pretty strong likelihood. We're still a ways out. I think Mike said he had them at least pencil us in a date on the calendar. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, we're moving forward with this, and we've already reserved the ballroom for it, and it's a really nice facility. It's an easy to get to place. Like Wally mentioned, it's right at the foothills before the hilly country starts as you head toward West Virginia.
That time of the year should be beautiful down there.
Mm-hmm. The weather should be perfect. Good temperatures and fall weather.
And it'd be nice to spend an extra day or so just to see some of the things down there. Very interesting area. Very interesting area. There's Indian artifacts that were found there. The ancient Indians apparently had trade routes that were very complex, and they traded with the Indians that inhabited Montana. Was just traveling in their canoes. It was a pretty advanced society. Very, very impressive. Very interesting.
Chillicothe itself, I believe, is an Indian term.
Oh, it sounds like it. Yeah. So that'd be great. That'd be a great time.
Yeah, we're hoping that people that may not be able to make it to Chicago will be able to. This will be in reach for them, and we did publish a list of cities that are within a day of it, and it's pretty significant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's like I say, it's a little bit closer to some of the East Coast cities. I think it's a little bit closer to some of the farther south locations too, like the Deep South and/or Florida. And so I think it enables a little bit. It's a slightly different section of the community that might be able to come to that. That it might be just a little too long a stretch to go to Chicago.
Right.
And like I said, we don't want to compete with CoCo Fest. We're trying to spread it out on the calendar. Kind of wanted to have a fall event anyway. So I think that's going to be a cool event. It's just a matter of working out the details. Neil and Mike and I, and maybe we need to form a larger group or whatever that's more dedicated to the specific event and have monthly meetings or something. But just need to figure out the details on planning and budgeting and that sort of stuff. But I think it's all within reach, and I think we're all pretty committed to it. So I plan to see something happen next time about this, or next year about this time.
At this time. Well, yeah, keep me posted, and anything that I can do, just let me know.
Sure. I know you sound like you're not too far away. I know Brett Gordon makes it sound like he practically lives there. It's like 40 minutes away or something, I think is what he said. So we have a couple of you guys that are local enough that could be helpful.
Yeah.
We also need to build up a stash of of Tandy artifacts that we can use to seed an auction of some sort. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, to get something like that going, that would be helpful.
I mean, we just need the key to Jim O'Keefe's storage room, I think, but.
Yeah, right.
all the stuff that he bought at the Chicago auctions, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff.
One disk drive, Jim.
I'll donate a disk drive. All right, progress. Yay.
Maybe we can trade Jim a disk drive for some of his other stuff and just.
I was telling. I don't know if I think. Neil, I showed Neil that there's a Craigslist listing here in Rockford, Illinois. It's a garage full of Tandy stuff, but they want the condition is it's a garage full. There was I saw a covered Model 2, and then those old Tandy external hard drives with the green and red buttons on them and the key switch. And then there was manuals and everything like that, and they didn't put a price on it, but I'm guessing that they want it all hauled out. And I says, you'd have to get another storage locker just to hold it all. But they want to get rid of it all.
Does Peter Satinsky know about this?
Who?
Peter Satinsky from Trash Talk. He might be interested. He might actually go out there and get it.
Really?
Yeah, he might.
Yeah. Neil's got I sent Neil the link. He can send. You can send it to this guy. Yeah, because. I bet you could pick it up for under $500 just because they want to get it moved,
I could definitely vouch. It's one heck of a haul. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in that locker.
Well, maybe we should contact Peter, and maybe some of us can go in to make it happen. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be happy to go in. That's what I'm saying. I'd like to cherry pick it, but even if we, if we all went into it's just got to all get moved. That's the problem. Somewhere.
Well, maybe we should figure that out.
Yeah,
No, that's
we'll
good.
rent the storage right next to it and just move it over.
Well, that's what I said. That's what I told Neil today. So rent the storage locker next. No, it's in a garage.
I mean,
I can
seriously,
tell
if we
it's
can
in a
hold on to
garage.
it.
But there's like, if you look at the pictures, there's stuff in front, and then there's stuff you can't even see in the back, and then there's books, manuals for all sorts of stuff. Yeah, a lot of pictures. It's quite a haul, but you're gonna have to take it all and have someplace to put it, and people to move it. But I'd be willing to help out, for a cherry pick or something here or there.
Well, we just put Neil on it. He's got a strong back, and
yeah, right.
He's got the big roomy automobile. We can take advantage of that.
I'm willing to look.
Yeah. Hey, Wally, it looks like it's going to be Cleveland and the Cubs.
Cubs won?
Well, they're up 5-0. It's in the 7th inning.
Oh,
So
yeah, it looks pretty good. Yeah.
it's looking pretty good. It'd have to be a complete collapse. I don't see it happening.
Yeah. Well, it's been a while since Cleveland won anything.
Well, it's been 108 years since the Cubs.
That long? Oh, wow.
Yeah. So.
Should we bring a goat?
Yeah, no goats, no goats.
The Indians have been a lot of fun to watch this year.
Yeah, the Cubs have been fun to watch, and I'm not a Cub fan.
Yeah.
John, I was telling Neil, my buddy and I, Chuck, are gonna help you write, co-authored. I guess we put it, Plateau of the Past. What we're gonna do is we're gonna set up some videos on YouTube, and we're gonna the first one will probably be just like an introduction, and then we're gonna actually play through the game as and then kind of comment on what we did and how we did it and stuff like that. It just kind of be a fun little thing, maybe 3-minute little segments at a time or something like that. Because you can die pretty quick in Plateau of the Past. So
sure, well, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, that'll be a fun thing to do. I just got to get the time. I've been working so hard that, but now with the fall, with the winter coming on, I'll have a little more time, and we'll try to do something hopefully before CoCo Fest. So yeah, I'll let you know when we do that. Maybe we'll do a little interview or something on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, that would definitely be awesome, and then we could do a screening at the CoCo Fest. That'd be cool too.
Oh yeah, we can do that too. Sure.
And then I still would like to work on breaking the copy protection on Plateau. I don't know a lot about it though.
Well, I mean, somebody broke it because it's broken. I mean, and that was that Pyrotector, I think that I bought to copy protect that stuff. So somebody was able to do that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, darn! There goes my project.
There you go. Yeah, because Neil's got this. That copy that Neil has is. I don't think that's copy protected, or is it, Neil?
No, that's a copy protected version. I'm using a special board.
Oh, it is copy protected. Oh, okay, yeah. All right. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, you can crack that, and we'll be handing out free copies of Farfall.
Oh Lord, might as well
I never got my Farfall. That was promised in my little cartridge.
Well, you didn't get one?
No. No, you said when you make another set, you said you'd take care of me.
Oh well, God, I didn't realize that was an outstanding debt.
I'm the guy that brings you coffee on Sunday mornings at GCF.
That's true. That's
coffee
true.
And donuts.
Although
I never got my Plateau of the Past T-shirt though, so.
Oh well. Yeah, this year, if I do T-shirts, I'm going to Neil. Did you ever put any of those on eBay? Those shirts?
No, they're coming on very soon. Very soon.
Cool. Yeah, we got some of the 25th anniversary ones I gave to Neil to throw on eBay.
Cool.
And then so next year, I don't know, maybe I might reprint a few of those in a little bigger size.
I'm actually wearing my Plateau of the Past shirt right now.
Really?
No, just trying to make me jealous.
Oh, don't worry. I got here yesterday wearing at Neil's house wearing the CoCo Crew Podcast shirt. So you're both covered.
Well, I'm wearing my Apple One T-shirt at the moment. So.
Oh, that's cool.
That's funny. So am I.
Are you really? Yeah, great minds think alike.
Clearly, we need to get to.
And I've got one more thing. I just thought of it tonight. I said I'm gonna write a song for Tandy and the color computer. That's going to be my goal for. We'll bring it out at the CoCo Fest.
Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
And then you can teach it to Brother Jeremy, and you guys can have a duet.
There you go. I was thinking something like, yes, Brother Jeremy.
Level 9, level 3 on the screen.
I was thinking of something like, what's it all about, Tandy?
That'd be good.
That's great.
Yeah, so clearly we need to get the T-shirt people back in business at the CoCo Fest. We hadn't had a T-shirt guy there in a while, and
yeah, I know. That was fun to do. Like I say, I misjudged the number of 3Xs that I needed. Like I could have probably sold about 30 more shirts if I'd have bought 30 more 3Xs.
Pun intended. The number is growing.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a thing at Linux Symposium in Ottawa, Canada. And for years, that was sort of the premier event for Linux conferences. And one of the last ones that I went to, they had an overview of the past years and blah blah blah, and then they have a graphic said this is a chart of our T-shirt sizes over the years.
Oh no! Oh my!
And 7 or 8 years before they'd all been mediums, and then at that point they were all 2 or 3Xs or whatever.
That is funny.
Very funny.
Yep, I've got to be going, so I'll have to leave you.
All right, Nick. Well, thanks for joining us. It was good to have you.
All right, then. Yes, good to participate. Thank you. Yep. All right, then. See you later.
Take care.
Cheers. Take care, Nick.
Bye.
Bye.
No, we didn't shag Nick off with all our non-CoCo talk, but
well, maybe a little, but it's all right. Are there any CoCo topics we should steer it back to? What can we talk about? Projects that are ongoing, projects we'd like to see, issues in the community. Anyone want to talk about implementing logic functions in BASIC? No.
I wouldn't mind seeing. What's the prognosis for that 64 the 6847 that guy was the VDG chip to HDMI? I think, was it to HDMI or was it to SVGA?
The VGA, I think.
Yeah.
Brendan Donahue.
Yeah, right. Yeah, how's that? Does anybody know how that's going?
I think it's going okay. I think he kind of had a while he didn't have a lot of time to apply to it. I've seen some postings not too long ago where he was still working with it.
That's FPGA, isn't it?
I think so.
Is that the basis for that? Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to get somebody to make it. We need to get somebody to make an FPGA gimmicks or the gimme chip.
Yeah. Well, of course, that's sort of implied with the Roger Taylor's thing and the CoCo 3 FPGA project, but it's not separated out. It's not a separate component. But it seems like something you could do. One of the things that I think is still a drawback for both of the FPGA projects is that they're still using a 6809 core that is not cycle accurate. And so if you have any programs that do any kind of cycle counting, then they're not likely to work. Which even the Tandy DOS sort of does some cycle counting in a couple of places. I guess it just happens to work out for them. So I don't know if you've seen the postings from Eric Gavrulik, where he is using the GODIL part, the GODIL or whatever, with that Acorn, what was it called? The project where you could drop a 6809 emulated CPU into this 40-pin board and actually physically replace the 6809. And so you could have a hardware debug capability on it.
I like that.
Anyway, he's been messing with that, and I think he's working to get the 6809 emulation back to a perfect cycle accuracy. That's part of, if you've seen the pictures he's posting, he's experimenting. Like he's got one where he's actually dropping it into a Vectrix so for some testing, as well as, of course, with the CoCo. I don't know what his ultimate game on that, if he's trying to feed back into the FPGA projects. Anyway, my point being, in that case, you're replacing the CPU chip with an FPGA, and of course, it's a completely different form factor than what the Gimme came in. But it certainly seems plausible that you could, if you could find the right, pieces of hardware to fit the socket, that you could isolate the FPGA implementation of the Gimme into something where you could drop it into the socket on the CoCo 3. Now that really is only good for basically repairing a CoCo 3 with a dead Gimme. If you want to go beyond that with adding new features and stuff, you're going to quickly hit limitations on the bus width or bus speed and that sort of stuff. But who knows, right? It's something that could be done.
Did you see Vincent Tran's podcast player that he had running on the CoCo? It's pretty cool.
That actually is that's actually Brett Gordon's player. Vincent Tran was showing it or whatever, but it was actually Brett Gordon that wrote it.
Oh yeah. That's right. But watch that video. It's pretty cool looking. It's neat.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's sort of on the questionable usefulness side of things, but still pretty fun, right? It's a cool project.
Yeah, that's right up our alley.
Exactly.
Hey, gentlemen, I'll tell you what, the Cubs are about to win the pennant here, so I'm going to I'm gonna log off here and celebrate with my wife, and so thanks for having me on.
Really taking this seriously.
Oh, absolutely. Wally, so what's the bet here in front of everybody? What's the bet? How about dinner on Saturday night at the CoCo Fest for the winner? The loser buys the winner.
All right. Well, make it Friday, because Saturday was that dinner. Right. That was a great dinner.
Right. Yeah.
Saturdays. So we'll make it Friday.
Friday night. Okay. Yeah.
Friday night.
Good.
Okay.
And good luck to the Indians.
Yeah. This should be fun. This should be.
It'll be fun. All right, fellas. Well, I'll be talking to you later. It was always good to talk to you.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, great to hear from you.
Thanks for joining, Jim.
Take care. Thanks for calling. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Well, Wally, you still there? What are your thoughts?
Yep.
What's
I'm here. Oh, I'm open to anything.
What keeps you coming back to CoCo Fest?
Well, I just like the CoCo. I still use my CoCo for a lot of serious stuff. I wrote some as I was. Well, Neil knows what's because he got that machine that I brought, but I wrote quite a few databases for myself, things that I tailored them to exactly what I needed them for, and how to print out reports and all this. And I use it to this day. I still love that little CoCo. So we're connected at the hip with the CoCo. And I've been going to the CoCo Fest for so long. It's family, see you guys every year and shoot the breeze, talk politics, whatnot. So that's keeping me going.
Yeah, that's cool. It's a lot of fun. I definitely agree on that. It's a great event. Definitely enjoy it. And like I said, I'm hoping we're going to get a kind of a second dose of it with the new Tandy Assembly event. And I'm definitely happy to think you'll be part of it. And certainly welcome to be there.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd really look forward to that.
Yeah. You doing any projects for CoCo Fest or anything? Anything like that you're working on, or
well,
just kind of?
I was thinking, like I said, of putting together another system like I had last year. I don't think I missed much in the way of tricks with that system. It was pretty versatile, and like I say, I use it all the time myself still. So other than that, I've been spending a lot of time on photography lately, and my wife's been having a little rough time with sciatic problems, back problems. So she can't drive or even ride in a car for too long. So I have to drive her around quite a bit. She's getting better, but she's still got some issues. So, I thought when I retired, I thought when I retired I'd have all this time, but I don't. I don't.
Well, I'm here with Neil this weekend visiting him, and he showed me the system that he got from you, Wally, and it was a pleasure. I got to spend some time sifting through the discs, and it was really, really nice the way you'd laid out all the different floppies and sorted it and labeled it, and it was very organized, very neat.
Oh yeah, and there's in that controller. there's 8 operating systems in that controller, and you can go from one system to the other with the switches. And I had that little cheat sheet to give you the combination of switches. But there's really nothing that you can't do on the CoCo, in that system. And I have. I think I had 4 of those that I assembled like that, and if I can get all the pieces together and assemble, I have a 6309 CoCo, and if I can get that all together, I think I'll bring that to Chicago this time and put it up for.
Yeah, we'd love to see it.
Yeah, and plus. Our house is so bad here. It's got so much junk in it that if you peeled off all the building material, you wouldn't see any difference. The house would be the same.
Oh, that's funny. Cool. Well, definitely looking forward to seeing you again in about 6 months, if not somehow before. Like I said, hopefully I'll have something to offer, but honestly, right now I'm not sure what the projects are going to be. I am supposed to be the coordinator for the, for the seminars or whatever, which I'd helped with last year. And so if you got something you want to talk about at CoCo Fest, definitely let me know.
All right.
And if you got an idea for somebody you'd like to recruit into talking, let me know that. I can try to be helpful there as well.
What's Mark up to these days?
Mark Marlette?
Yeah.
Well, he had some home problems a ways back. Had some flooding from I guess broken pipes.
Oh.
And sounded serious enough that he's had to tear up his house quite a bit and do some remodeling. I think he said that this weekend he was going off for some kind of vacation and hunting or whatever. So hopefully he's getting his life a little bit back to normal at this point. Oh, and he just had his son and daughter-in-law, I guess, just had another grandchild. So that should be exciting news at the Marlette place.
Uh-huh.
So, well, it's Mark's grandchild, not his son's, but
Yeah, he's busy as ever. He's always busy. He doesn't have an idle minute of the day either.
No.
Yeah, but for him, that's normal.
He's quite the perfectionist. He's had some issues with his VGA adapter, the Super Spectra or whatever, that he was pursuing initially just as a quality thing, and he kind of dug in about, well, I don't really like this part either, and this part and whatever, and he's kind of been revamping the whole thing, and really pouring the midnight oil, shall we say, onto that.
Uh-huh. Well, that's how those things are. You start out, then you get sucked in and involved, and one thing leads to another.
Nope.
Proof that black holes exist.
Right, and they're all retro projects, actually. So, well, John Strong, there. Do you got anything else to add to the discussion? Any topics that have come up in the course of the evening, or?
Well, listening there, I 3D printed this morning. Hadn't get to play with it much yet. A stick to go on one of the little thumbsticks instead of a thumb one that looks like more like a standard joystick. And it's fitting, and it looks like it might actually stay in place. That's been my big concern, is because it's plastic fitting on plastic, and some of my previous ones would come right off. I'm like, okay, am I going to be able to get this to actually stick, or going to have to glue it? What kind of glue we're going to have to do it? So a little bit of CoCo progress.
Well, now you got a second chance at Tandy Assembly, so you're covered.
Okay.
Yeah. You have a 6-month release schedule now.
Yeah, well, then I get the other projects, for that. And something I've had, and I've mentioned this on the back burner at some time, and one of the reasons working with the joysticks and things is, I definitely want to do that CoCo 3 version of River Raid.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just got to find time to do it all. But I couldn't resist last year after Nick and crew released that high-res joystick adapter software that, got to see if it works with something. And so I pulled out my Minesweeper stuff, and sometime later, after I obsessed over being too much details, we have Bomb Squad using that great routine they did with the high-res joystick.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again, Nick. If you haven't heard, I've publicly thanked you and your team, John Kowalski, and those projects help everybody out, that he took time out and did. So that's appreciated. I don't know, is he still on here? Looks like we've had some people drop off.
Yeah, Nick had to drop, but we'll definitely pass that on in the podcast, so he knows about it.
Yeah. And so, but like I said, I don't want to talk about some of this stuff too much in case I don't get it done. I don't want it to be, vaporware.
Sure.
We can't guarantee WikiLeaks won't do it, but we won't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but, I'm kind of excited. I've got to get some time to work on the hardware. I've been swamped over with the mini MPI and fixing the problem in the MIDI case. Okay. That's a combination of, I don't think the plastic batch that I got was real good from that, and some bugs in the firmware and the hardware and the software I was using. And I've worked around it some others a lot quicker than this, and I found I had to just redesign the piece and take out some features that I wanted in there the way it looked, just to get it done. I was wasting, when you print a dozen cases, you call it quits on that design. You go and redesign it, just taking too much time. I liked the look of it, and it really looked nice, and the flaw wasn't that big. Mike, you've seen it at the VCF, and I pointed out it really wasn't that big of a flaw. but it's a definite flaw that you can notice, and I didn't want to ship it with the flaw.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the debugging process, and it takes time. But it looked really good, though. Your cases are really nice.
And the problem is, our reputation out here depends on your latest product, And my cases have a good reputation, and I'm trying to maintain that, And
Sure. Cool. So, well, guys, where does that leave us? Anybody else got something to talk about?
Well, I'm good.
Mark?
I'm basically just along for the ride.
Okay.
We're glad you're here.
A lot of things I'd like to do, I just don't always have the energy to do them.
I understand that. A huge stack of things that I'd like to do. Looking at most of it now. I'm hoping someday I'll be able to retire and work it down before I die.
Your people that inherit your estate will appreciate it.
Definitely.
And, Mark, if you're ever able to make it to a CoCo Fest.
That's on my list of things to do.
Well, a lot of this kind of conversation goes on at the CoCo Fest, and you get there, and sometimes you talk about projects that you don't talk about other times, and get different feedback and so on.
Yeah, no, I've been paying attention to both the Kansas Fest for Apple and the CoCo Fest, and it would definitely be cool. I was watching Stevie Stroh's videos, their impromptu jam session. But I play bass, so I'd have to probably ping that along. Yeah, my thing is really been wanting to do some networking stuff. They brought out another network card for the Apple II called the Ethernet 2, and I see they're working on one for the CoCo, but it's based upon an older chipset, the Cirrus one, I think. Citrix? Cirrus.
Yeah. Yeah, it's closer to the Ethernet 1 in terms of what the hardware does. Neil, Mike, anything else to add?
I think we call that a wrap.
All right. Well, Wally, Mark, John, definitely thank you for joining us, hanging in there.
You're listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast with Neil Blanchard and John Linville.
Alright, welcome back to the Games Corner on episode 17. And this is part 2 of Color Max Deluxe. Last month I did a review on Color Max Deluxe that was written back in 1987 by Eric Gravulik and Greg Miller. For anyone who didn't catch last month's episode or doesn't know what this program is, well, it's a graphics program similar to Windows and Mac Paint, but only better. Since my review from last month, I have taken the time to dig deeper into Color Max and trying and learning the different options. Well, all I can say is the more I've used this program, the more I'm blown away with it. One of my favorite features is the ability to have colors on your drawing flashing on and off. This simulates a nice animation when set in a particular order. I also like that it could load GIF pictures. There, I pronounced it the right way. GIF. I have to be honest, I used to pronounce it GIF. I don't know if that makes me old or not, but at least I'm corrected. I also like that it supports DS69 picture files, and those are files created from the MicroWorks DS69 digitizer, which I was actually able to test because I now own one. A big thanks to Michael Rowan for that. And to top it off, you can save any of these picture types into its own picture format with the file extension MGE. So basically you can take a GIF picture or a DS69 picture file, and then you can actually save it into its own format. And I also have to say that when you're loading and saving these pictures, it's actually very fast disk access. Now I know I'm using a CoCo SDC, but it's definitely pretty fast. Another handy feature is you can select the drive right from a drop-down menu. So basically if you want to load files from drive 1, drive 2, drive 3, you can actually do this, so you don't have to close the program or run any weird commands. So I was able to make a picture disk image on drive 1 and keep Color Max disk image on drive 0. So this was very handy for loading and saving picture files. I also got ambitious and tried to do a printout with my Tandy DMP105 printer. It worked by going through all the motions, but nothing printed due to an aged, dried out ribbon. Now if I can just find a new ribbon for this printer. A ribbon re-inking project is up for grabs. Anyone? Well, there you go. If you're looking for a fantastic graphics program for the CoCo 3, I highly recommend trying out Color Max Deluxe. You don't even need a Tandy high-res adapter anymore because Eric recently just released an updated version, which is version 1.03 in case you're looking for it on the Color Computer Archive website, that has the built-in high-res driver. I hope you enjoyed this month's Game Corner episode of a review that is not a game. Until next month, happy CoCoing.
After these messages,
we'll be right back.
We have now reached the end of episode 17. Flip the tape over and do a C-load'em until next month. We will be back for your listening pleasure. This was definitely a cool episode with the CoCo Fest roundtable discussion and being the 6-month mark away from CoCo Fest, and the mention of Tandy Assembly, and can't forget Halloween. So many great things to look forward to. I'd like to thank our host John Linville for providing another awesome tech segment on the Dragon CoCo DOS compatibility. It definitely cleared up a lot of questions I had. Now I want to hook up my Dragon again. The cool thing is, I didn't even know that he was going to do a tech segment on this, so this was quite a surprise. I also like to thank Mike Rowan, friend of the show, for joining us during the recording and for creating those cool advertisement promos you're hearing, and for making a trip down to my place last weekend. It was awesome having Mike here inside the studio when we were recording the CoCo Fest roundtable discussion live. And I also had a blast at the Canadian Air Force Museum with him. Mike is definitely the person to be with if you want to learn about these old warplanes, as he knows so much about them. Last but not least, we'd like to thank all of you for listening. We appreciate your feedback and support. See you next month for episode 18, and guess what? By then, it'll only be 5 months until CoCo Fest. Ha ha ha, sorry Mark. Well, in the words of John, retro forever and CoCo forever. Have a great month, everyone.